Peace. Peace, everyone. Thank you for joining. So, where's this power at? Let me know where it's at. Peace, everyone. Peace. All right. So yeah, we'll be getting started shortly. My guest will be joining us, and we're gonna get this conversation rolling. We touched on it a little bit. What I said, the Duke of Tears, want to thank him for coming on. Peace. Yeah, we touched on this conversation a little bit. Woodtown, New Jersey. Got you. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll be there. So yeah, touched a little bit on the conversation, and got a whole lot of feedback recently in regards to the term Aboriginal. So we're gonna discuss that a little bit as well. You know what I mean? How's everybody's day been? Y'all had a good day today? Say peace to everyone, blessings to everyone. Good day today. Okay, make sure y'all can hear me. Peace to everyone, blessings to everyone. Got 13 watching, it's the magical number. We'll start there. Yeah, so I got I would say a good friend of mine coming on today, somebody I've known for a while. Had the opportunity to watch him, watch his work, you know what I mean? And it's definitely somebody I respect. It's another continuation of a series of conversations we're going to be having with people who don't necessarily agree with us on everything, you know what I mean? But we're going to talk about the things we can agree on and set a new standard for conversation so we can have some, intellectual discourse that doesn't degrade into, you know what I mean, name calling and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely excited about this this live right here. It's been years in the making. Type of conversations I've had behind closed doors, behind the scenes with people for years. You know what I mean? Been involved with a lot of different houses of thought, you know what I'm saying? I interacted with a lot of different groups, you know what I mean? But still Turtle, always been Turtle, you know what I mean? As I interacted with these people, took the best part for myself and kept it moving, you know what I mean? It's a lot of similarities in these different cultures. So you gotta, these cultures and subcultures. So you have to be able to see the similarities and understand the differences. And that's how you can move amongst people with the least amount of conflict. So yeah, I spent a lot of time studying with different groups, you know what I'm saying? And honor each group as I spent that time with them. You know what I mean? But still Turtle the whole time. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we're gonna have a good show today. Yeah, like there's plenty of people, you know, who understand and know their identity, that study other, you know, world cultures. You know what I mean? And I can say I did that for a long time, and it allowed me to see, like I said, the similarities in all these cultures. So I take that as a benefit in subcultures as well, because what we're probably discussing now is an emerging subculture. You know what I mean? So that's the conversations that we're having now about these subcultures. Yeah. So yeah, let's hopefully our guest checks in soon and we can get it started. Welcome, it's turtlegang.nyc, where we discover truth of the edge of transparency. Um, we here just to create dialogue and have conversations about things that are not necessarily hot topics in the community, but things that are relevant and important to the community, whether the community's talking about them or not. So tonight's guest is Sharif Anael-Bey, waiting for him to tap in. I'm gonna go check on him. See something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And once again, I want to thank everybody for walking this red road with us. You know what I mean? It's a long journey, it spans generations. You know, it's not a quick fix. You know what I mean? It's a long and dedicated journey. It takes you through many chambers. You know what I mean? Nothing's gonna happen overnight. It took us like 7 generations to get where we at now. It's gonna take 7 more to get us out. So it's up to you to start now. You know what I mean? Be the foundation of that for your family. Start moving in that direction. So yeah, while we waiting for our guests, I'm gonna you know, anybody got any questions, anything like talk about briefly till our guest arrives, feel free to throw something in the chat. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, Black African American. Yeah. Now you can definitely be more specific than that. You know what I'm saying? I would suggest that. Kulamasi, Hetch. So yeah, for those who are still dealing with their identity and what to put on like paperwork and stuff, I would just suggest, um, you know, definitely, you know, don't put Black or African American. Those are not really identities. You know, I would say whatever you can discover on your family tree or in your genealogy, whatever nationality identifies itself, put that on it. Put as many nationalities as you can on there. You know what I mean? Defining who you are. Mm. A lot of things that make you question yourself. Yeah, you're gonna find when you start to study yourself, you're definitely gonna see things that are outside of the narrative that has been presented to you. You know what I mean? So yeah, you're definitely gonna question a lot of things. I don't know if it's yourself, it's questioning maybe the things that you have accepted, you know what I mean, things you've been taught, but you know, when you're indoctrinated or taught that from a young age, when it's all around you, you know, where else are you supposed to get your information from? You know what I mean? That's not really you. This is you being a product of the society we live in, the times we live in, the educational system we was reared in. You know what I mean? You should question all that, but do it, do it realistically. Irish slave, English genocide, yeah. Yeah, a lot of us would have Irish ancestry. A lot of people, here would have interacted with the Irish. They were treated very poorly, and a lot of these communities that were treated similarly came together. You know what I mean? And interacted in many ways. You should always be redefining yourself and growing. You know what I mean? Adding more positives to who you are and destroying the negative. So yeah, I commend you on that. Let's see something. Okay, so yeah, waiting on my man right now, Sharif. See what's going on with the brother. Said I'm looking forward to this conversation. Okay, getting on in 5. All right, so he'll be here soon. Be here soon. Yeah, and interesting thing about this brother I got coming on tonight is our paths have intersected in multiple ways, even denounced to us. You know what I mean? So I'll talk about that a little bit with this brother. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a great conversation. Going to be a great conversation. So you want to be able to help your family? Okay. Yeah. Well, learning, that's what's going to bring you into a position to be able to help your family. Right now, I believe our guest is here, so we're about to bring the brother up.
Yes, sir.
Peace, brother. Islam.
Peace. Islam.
Islam. Good to
Osio, brother.
have you. Great to
Yes, sir.
have you, brother.
Yes, sir.
How's
Like
everything been?
all is well, brother, man. All is well. I'm good. How about
Okay.
yourself?
Great. Can't complain, man. Can't complain.
Yes,
Definitely honor to have you on here, yo. I've watched your work for years. You know what I mean? You was somebody that was able to set a standard for me as to
mm,
how I measure, you know what I mean, real active, you know what I mean, Moors in their community. You know what I mean? Like I said, I watched a lot of things you did. I watched what you stood for. And
yes.
I commend you, brother. Definitely it's an honor to have you on here.
Bro, I appreciate that, brother, man. Likewise for what you do in your community. You know what I mean? Plus too, I just got to shout out our brother, man. We have another connection, right?
Absolutely.
In the martial arts world. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? Yeah, I love that brother, man.
Hmm.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the brother is talking. This is what I alluded to earlier. Recently, we lost our chief, great
Right.
man, Darius Two Bears Ross,
Two Bears Ross.
also known as Taliona.
That's
He
right.
was the chief of my tribe, the Onondaga Northeastern Band of Cherokee and Lenape. So he
Right.
was the chief of my tribe, and this man had a relationship because this man could tell you better the type of level my chief was on in terms of martial arts. So Sharif had a relationship with my chief, unbeknownst to me, for years, right?
Right.
With my chief. So let me let you elaborate on that a little bit. I'm glad you brought it up.
Oh, well, again, the various people are people, you know what I mean? And communities are communities. The whole, one of the primal and primary aspects of humanity is to commune and come together. And so we
Mm.
belong it's very normal to belong to multiple communities and you know what I'm saying? That's just a normal human thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that being said, there are many different society groups that interlock. And so the martial arts world is one of them. Chief Two Bears is a part of my kung fu family. We're not in the same lineage, but the same family. You know what I'm saying? And from the martial arts perspective, and he's like a big brother to me. You see, and my older training brother honored and revered him like a brother. And with us, that's like real. The only difference is that we ain't come from the same physical mother, but it's like I'm gonna bleed for him because I know he would bleed for me, and anybody else he would bleed for, they get the same treatment. You see what I'm saying? So as a Moorish American, or one who identifies with descendants of Moroccans born in America, my relationship with you, brother, is the same. You see what I'm saying? Because we have that connection and we have this connection here too. Yes, sir.
Okay, so just a little bit, just briefly talk about, when I think the first time I actually was around you,
yes, sir.
I was shooting a documentary for King Simon.
Right.
And he brought us to the dojo, and
yes,
you
sir.
were there to demonstrate.
Yes,
so
sir.
That's when I first got to, see you, hear people talk about you. So that was like, okay, brother's real official. Then obviously, I would see you in the community, different events.
Right.
And then we chopped it up a bit at the Wu-Tang reunion.
For sure.
Right? Yeah, chopped it up a little bit there.
That's right.
And then I saw you your debate with Brother Reggie. Right.
Yes.
So that was like, yeah, you know what I mean? But like I said, we've known each other for a while.
Well, the fact you mentioned King Simon, shout out to King Simon.
Yeah. Shout out to King Simon.
He's part of the old school. A lot of the viewers watching you today, watching right now as we speak, don't really know that much. And it's not a slight on them. But a lot of the things that they read about, that the viewers are reading about and catching on social media, are things that you lived. You know what I'm saying? That you were there in the flesh, outside.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of this stuff we were doing when there was no social media. You really had to be outside with it.
Really had to be outside. Absolutely right.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So so this, I feel, is what makes someone like yourself such a good, has such good qualifications for this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Right. I know your scholarship, you take that seriously. You know what I mean? Boots have been on the ground. You've done work in your community. You know what I'm saying? Like, this can't be refuted. You know what I mean? So the conversation, it's obviously going to be multi-layered. But basically, the genealogy of the Aboriginal community. Now, let me lay this out so people understand. When I say Aboriginal community, I'm not talking about any one community that identifies itself as Aboriginals. I'm talking about a phenomenon that has taken place over the past 10 to 15 years, where the shift has changed from Afrocentric to now Indigenous American, right? So what happened in the span of those years to tip the scales from one perspective to the other? And I know at the foundation of a lot of this train of thought are various different groups, and we're going to talk about the genealogy, the evolution of this. So the reason I am sitting here talking with this brother is because he is a respectable member of the Moorish Science Temple.
Yes, sir.
And I know the Moorish Science Temple has been at the foundation of a lot of what we call the awakening of people of color, Black people, African Americans, whatever, Negroes, wherever we've been labeled. The Moorish Science Temple has been there, whether people like it or not.
That's fact. That's fact.
Let's begin this conversation. Do we begin it with Marcus Garvey, or do we begin it with Noble Drew Ali?
Oh man, like if we're to choose between the two, we would start with Marcus Garvey. I'm going to tell you why. Even though Prophet Noble Drew Ali began in 1913 in Newark, New Jersey, we in the Moorish Science Temple of America and Prophet Noble Drew Ali declared honor Marcus Garvey as the forerunner, because While the Prophet got started in Newark, New Jersey in 1913, it wasn't until after 1924 that the movement really took root. And that was in the Midwest in Chicago when the Prophet established the first temple in Chicago in 1925, right?
Okay.
And why was that important? It was important, relative to Marcus Garvey, is because of Marcus Garvey's work, the minds of our people were already very seasoned with the ideal of nationalism.
Okay, now let me ask you this.
Yes,
did
sir.
Marcus Garvey, did he teach that a percentage of the population here were indigenous to this land?
No, sir.
Was that a part of his teaching?
Not to my knowledge.
No. Okay.
Not to my
Okay.
knowledge. Not at all. Not at all. Not at
Okay.
all.
So he was primarily about it was framed as back to Africa, but I believe it was more about opening trade with Africa.
I'm glad you said that, brother. You see, here's a part of our problem, and I'm going to touch on this because I'm very big on this. Prophet Noble Drew Ali says, if I can get you to think, you can save yourself. The presumption is what? We lost the ability to think. We think we're thinking because we got thoughts. You know what I'm saying? That's not necessarily thinking, right? But anyway, so I really want to address the psychology behind the methodologies that we're going to point at, right?
Okay.
So, Garvey, the whole back to Africa thing was really a uniting of peoples of African descent here with resources there.
Gotcha.
The people and resources there. You see, that's what it was really about. It wasn't about us going back to the continent of Africa per se. That's not what it was about. It was about, okay, we have education, we have this, we have advantages here that we need to marry and merge with resources and other advantages there. Gotcha. Look at what the Chinese are doing right now, but they're not doing it that way. Look at what, all right, you see what I'm saying? Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on. So now discussing Noble Drew Ali.
Yes, sir.
Did Noble Drew Ali teach, allude to, or was that a part of his teachings that a percentage of our people were from here?
Yes and no. Let's. So I want to avail, or I want to provide to the viewers a number of anthropological and sociological terms and ethnographic terms. Gotcha. There's two schools of thought in the field of anthropology and sociology and archaeology. One is called isolationism. One is called diffusionism. If you're going to have an intelligent conversation about this whole indigenous versus African thing, you must know about these, or else you are hamstringed from the door. You must know the difference between diffusionism and isolationism. Isolationism says that in ancient times, cultures developed independent of each other and didn't have any or very little, if any, cross-cultural interaction. So if there's any similarities, it happened by chance, right? Gotcha. Diffusionism says just the opposite, says that for thousands of years, ancient cultures enjoyed millennia of cross-cultural pollination and interaction, right? Now, the question you got to ask yourself is, which one of these ideals supports white supremacy? And then when you look at how there's a history of the Smithsonian Institution throwing artifacts into the Atlantic Ocean, right? And all kinds of things like this, then you have your answer. So to answer your question about Prophet Noble Drew Ali's perspective on this, his teachings demonstrated that he was a staunch diffusionist. Meaning he said that we are the descendants of inhabitants of Africa. He also said that Moors were up and down the Mississippi long before the European came. Now, you know how we do, because we still have the European psychology. We hear something like that, right? I'm kind of jumping ahead. We hear something like that. We go, oh, that means that we never came here on slave ships. We were always here. And so what is that, people? That's reverse isolationism. That's reactionary to Eurocentric isolationism. See what I'm saying? So again, I'm addressing the psychology. The idea that we have to have our own narrative. We can't use the Eurocentric lens. Believe it or not, many still are.
That's white, black, exact
Come on,
opposite.
brother. Come on,
like,
brother.
There's nothing in between. When actual reality exists, all in between is the multi-textured layers of the truth that make the truth so,
rich. So rich.
So rich. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. So, okay, so Noble Drew Ali alluded to these things.
Absolutely. So, but again, so like we have a story in our teachings about a man who's trying to feed his family by tilling the land to try to grow crops, but the land is rocky and dry, right? It's difficult, so he could barely make a living. And then a man comes along and says, "Listen, my guy, you need to dig deeper. In other words, you're in the wrong profession. You're in the wrong profession. Don't be a farmer. Be a miner. You got diamonds and gold under there, but you got to dig deeper for it. It's going to take a little harder work, but it's going to reward you." You see what I'm saying? That's what we've learned to think in a scanty way. You see what I'm saying? And real history, as you know, I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to you, but for the viewers, real history, real sociology, real ethno-history is much more nuanced. You see what I'm saying? It's much more nuanced. Like, for instance, I was looking at an article today about the Aita people in the Philippines. The Aita people, dark-skinned, woolly hair, definitely what some people would call Africoid or whatever, right? But these are the indigenous people of the Philippines. But in the article, it says, yes, they are indigenous Filipinos, but they are the earliest travelers to that area from Africa. So which one are they? Are they African or are they indigenous Filipino? Now, and
time would determine that.
Is there room for them to be both?
Yeah, like time is what determines that. Time and the evolution of the specific culture, which now identifies them as a separate people than who they were when they left.
How about that, brother? That's right.
So we're talking about the birth of a distinct, people as a nation out of that which they came from.
Right. And to your point, right? Those people didn't just pop up out of the ground in the Philippines.
No.
And then not travel nowhere for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. If you think that, you are a reverse isolationist. See?
Now, there's also drawbacks to being isolated in that there's no gene renewal.
Ooh. Talk about it, bro. Talk about it.
Okay, so when you have there's been many species and communities of man that have gone extinct, and the primary reason is not because they couldn't survive, or they weren't good hunters, or whatever the case may be, had a lot to do with the fact that they didn't inject new genes into their system. So basically, this is where you get the idea of inbreeding. You know what I mean? After thousands of years of that, people are going to be sterile and things of that nature. And this is how whole communities would go extinct. You know what I mean? So
to your point,
it's just like the land. So that's why, like, a lot of these things tie in when you're talking about migration routes, which create road systems, which now create trade points, right? Which now create places for people of different areas to interact. And when you do trade, you're not only trading goods, you're trading genetics and DNA.
You're trading culture too. That's a fact.
Culture too. Absolutely.
Yes. That's big because, once again, we are people here in America, especially because we've been deprived of our own narrative, number one. Two, we've been deprived of the things that come with our own narrative, and that's our own process of reasoning and, how to process information, right? Absolutely. Because we've been deprived of these things, our thinking is shallow. It's not as nuanced as it's supposed to be. It's not as nuanced as the world actually is. Right. So what you just said, brother, blended so many different fields of study. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it blended a lot of them, and that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not so as simple as many of us would like it to be. You know what I mean? That's so important, brother. That's so, because you're talking about, like, for instance, how let's say an ethnic group over time can go from ethnic group to a socio-political entity of many different ethnic groups.
Yeah.
How an ethnic group can be the foundation for an entire kingdom or an empire. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So yes, let me I got my bullet points. So
no doubt.
So at this point in time, there wasn't an actual teaching that was proliferating the Negro African American communities that we were from here. Now, that's not to discount, obviously, what we knew at the time. I like to think that at the time, the families that were from Africa knew who they were. Right. The families that were Indigenous Americans knew who they were. You know what I mean? At that point in time, we're having a conversation about what we think people may or may have not known in a time 50, 60, 100 years ago.
There you go.
Might have been very commonly known in all these communities. I know, like, I can speak for my community, it was.
Yes.
It wasn't, but we're talking about a different time now. So,
but brother, even in the, let's keep it a buck, right? It wasn't until the advent of social media.
Yeah. So I just don't want to get ahead of myself.
Okay.
So
No.
Talk about,
right.
That's I want to talk about what was going on in these communities, in these actual communities that we all drew from.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Historically, you know what I mean? To formulate the ideas and concepts we have now.
That's fact.
You know what I mean? So we know that when it comes to nationalism and things of that nature, Marcus Garvey brought that conversation to the table on a national level.
Fact. I mean, his movement in terms of bodies involved the largest. You know what I'm saying? The largest.
Noble Drew Ali brought another level of teaching. So from there, we have the Nation of Islam.
Yes.
Right? So I'd like to think they grew. Is it true they grew out of the Moorish Science Temple?
I think you know what? Let me quote my good brother and colleague, Dr. Wesley Muhammad, on that matter. A number of years ago when he was asked this very similar question. He himself said, "We bear witness in the Nation of Islam that Prophet Noble Drew Ali was the foundation of Islam in America." And then he quoted Honorable Elijah Muhammad in saying, Honorable Elijah Muhammad in Supreme Wisdom, these pamphlets 1 and 2, he said that he is just continuing that work. So from that perspective, I would agree. I'd say yes. In that respect, a large number of the early members of the Nation of Islam were either current or former members of the Moorish Science Temple of America.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, a little bit of New York history, right? Captain Yusuf Shah, aka Captain Joseph X, who was captain of the FOI in Mosque number 7 in New York during the time of Malcolm, right? His full name was Joseph Gravite Eel Jr. His father was Joseph Gravite Eel Sr., Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Temple number 10 in Newark, New Jersey. That's history. That's history. Brother Ramza, the late Brother Ramza, who was the national jeweler for the Nation of Islam. He was one of Mr. Farrakhan's best friends. He and Mr. Farrakhan joined in 1955, the exact same day, the Nation of Islam. He showed us his nationality card for the Moorish Science Temple of America himself. He said his whole family was members. You see what I'm saying? So there's definitely a connection. It's not necessarily the connection that a lot of us think it is, but there's definitely a connection.
Okay. So from there, this is like where I would like to, or probably say our era came in, where we can now start speaking to some things. So from the Nation of Islam came the 5% Nation.
Facts.
And the 5% nation disseminated a level of information on the streets.
That's a fact.
Right. And this is where kind of like, I would like to think the conscious street community began. Like, foundation. Before that, it was the older ones, suits, discipline, having these conversations.
That's right. Fact.
5% brought to the table on the corner, regular hood looking, whatever, going through sciences, and also bringing that edge to it. Like, what? You know what I'm saying? Like, it can happen right now.
That's real, bro. That's real. Real quick, too. So, like, that's what happened for us on the East Coast. What you said is 100% right and exact. In the Midwest, it was the gang culture. In the Midwest, it was people's nation and folks' nation. You see what I'm saying? As it relates to what we're familiar with, it was people's nation, right?
Yeah.
The 5 point, the 5-pointed star. And you talking about Black Peace Stone, you talking about Vice Lords, you're talking about Four Corner Hustlers, you're talking about, Latin kids. We have a connection, doctrinally in that respect, and then the brothers, Folk Nation, who both bang the 6-pointed star, they were connected, in a sense with the Hebrew Israelite demonstration. You see what I'm saying? So, but either way it goes, you're seeing a very, very similar, very similar development of this narrative that is not Eurocentric. That got disseminated by way of religious organizations into the street.
Yeah, exactly. Now, something I want to point out, because like what I've been seeing is today's Aboriginal community, philosophically, they have bits and pieces of all these different doctrines that formulate a belief system that might or might not be absolutely true.
Come on,
and
brother.
What you bring to the table is, when we're talking about diffusionism and isolationism, reverse like that is a heavy element. Like that's the psychology of it.
That's the psychology.
Something that affected the psychology of the people, right? In multiple ways for me, because I saw it happen when brothers got knowledge of self, right? And learned that the Black man is God. Right. It empowered them. For some, it made them arrogant. It made them feel as though they was owed something. I've seen it affect a lot of different people a lot of different ways. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
And it's the man. It ain't the math. It ain't the knowledge. It's the man.
Come on, bro.
So the student enrollment, I think this is important. This is something that always struck me because, like I said, I'm coming from a community that knows we're indigenous to the Americas, but I'm also a part of a movement that alludes to coming from Africa.
There you go.
Right? Because of the roots that is coming out of.
For sure.
Which we just, and this is a philosophy. We're not talking genealogy. We're not talking that. We're talking what our minds are going through.
There you go, brother.
So in the student enrollment, the first 3 questions are: who is the original man? Who is the colored man? And what is the population of the original nation in the wilderness of North America?
That's right.
So the answer to who was the original man is the Asiatic Black man, the owner of the cream of the planet Earth, father of civilization, God of the universe. Now, that was very, coming from a perspective of Africa, because up until I got my lessons, what was prolific in the community and culture was Africa.
Yes, sir.
As the foundation. Right. But now we hear Asiatic Black man. Right? Now it resonates on multiple levels because Asia, is the body, Attic is the mind. You know what I'm saying? It could resonate. There's
a number of different levels of understanding of that. Yes, sir.
But I'm talking about it when you first read it and you don't got those levels of understanding and you see Asiatic Black man, that adds a whole new layer to what you think you know about yourself.
Come on, brother.
You understand? So, and then it goes on to say, the answer to the second question, who is the colored man? The colored man is the Caucasian, white man, Yakub's grafted devil. You know what I mean?
Right.
Skunk of the planet Earth.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Then the third answer to what is the population of the origination in the wilderness of North America, this is what had me sitting up as I'm getting my
Mm.
lessons. It says the population of the original nation in the wilderness of North America is 17
17
million
million.
plus
2
the
million
2
Indians.
million Indians.
All over the planet Earth, four
So
billion 400 million. Yes, sir.
absolutely, there you go. So being Lenape and known in my family and seeing that, I'm like, yeah, that's like it was inclusive of us, and it spoke to another history that if you don't know what you're reading in that math, you ain't really gonna be able to apply it.
Come on,
You know what I'm
brother.
saying? Because I'm
That's right.
seeing Asiatic, you know what I'm saying? And I know my people, I know our story, right? And then I'm
Yes.
seeing it's taking account of us in the math,
Oof.
like plus the 2
Oof.
million.
Mm.
You know, so but what I'd like to say about the 5% nation, it has such an impact culturally on the people that much of the culture of 5% is all over in the mannerisms and everything we do. Like I hear people all the time, peace God, and I know they don't got math.
Come on,
Like I
brother.
know if it was back in the day and you pressed them like how you see today's degree, it's gonna be a problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I know what it was. You know what I'm saying? Like how people was, if you say you this, you got to show and prove.
That's
Now
right.
it's just it's all cool, and
Right.
I don't got no problem with how people express the culture now. Like I just
Right.
know the difference. So
Yes. Yes.
like I just feel like that level of that come from the 5% nation,
Can I? Can
right?
I want to speak to what you just said because and I want to underscore it because I don't. I want to make sure the viewers really digest that.
Mm-hmm.
The see, because a lot of times we lose sight of the forest for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
We develop a lust for little details on the trees instead of recognize the fact that we're in a big giant forest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the purpose. See, there's a purpose for knowing the answers to those questions. It is to directly change the psyche. And from there, you have a narrative for which to think in a way that will benefit yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
those those three questions had a literal earth-shattering effect on the psyche of our people.
Mm-hmm.
Earth-shattering. Earth-shattering. It was paradigm shifting. That's the significance of it. But as you put it, it cuts both ways. You see what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? So we can become polarized in that and then start thinking, oh, I'm God. I do what I want to do. I don't have no responsibilities because I'm God. I'm God. I can say what I want to that woman. I'm God. I can do it. You see, now so now our minds are poisoned by the very, you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Now our minds are poisoned, but that
Arrogance.
demonstrates the power. It's just like I could have medicine on my shelf, right? But that medicine was prescribed for me because of a particular condition. If somebody else takes it, it's no longer medicine. You see
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? And so
Absolutely.
it's got to be used properly. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not used properly, oh, it's gonna shift your paradigm, but it may put you in a place that you really don't need to be. You see,
Mm-hmm.
but we have
Absolutely.
to understand the gravity of what it is that was put in our hands. You know what I'm saying? And not to jump
Absolutely.
forward, but I think that not think I know that that's what happened. This polarization has happened on a number of levels, and that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why we're here talking today. People heard, whoa, people that look like you and me that are today classified as Negro, Black, Colored, African American, quote unquote. Whoa, some of these people were literally American Aborigines.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that must mean we never came from Africa. That must
Yeah.
mean we have no ties to Africa whatsoever. That must mean you see, and
Mm-hmm.
we polarized ourselves, and we've done the exact opposite of what the purpose of this information was for in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, and that was to return us back to the families and nations. That's why that lesson, right? Who's the original man? The original man is the
Mm-hmm.
Asian. It doesn't say the African man.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because people like you and me from the most ancient of times have peopled the planet.
Yeah, people of the planet. And Asia was the
So
great melting pot.
it didn't isolate us. It's the whole idea of the
Mm-hmm.
uniting of people that look like you and me, even if we have different cultures, even if we have different languages, even if we have different names and ways to identify ourselves. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. From one come many. Right.
Yes, sir.
So
Right.
yeah, and that's like that was like some slick. But so so we're talking about, so even then at that point, the 5% lessons were inclusive of Native Americans.
Absolutely,
Right?
brother.
But it still didn't say, Negro, you are the Native American.
Nope.
Still didn't say that. Like that message still wasn't rock solid ingrained into the minds of the people. Right.
That's the truth, brother. That's the truth.
When we reference terms like Indigenous and Aboriginal, we were talking about specific people, communities on the planet in different places. Like when we say Negrito, we know exactly who we're talking about. A group of people that look like us but live in Asia.
Yes.
You know, when we say Aborigines, we know we're talking about a group of people that look like us, would be our families, but live in Australia. Right? But we understand these terms are anthropological.
That's
anthropological terms.
Yes,
all right.
Correct.
So now what you have also in the midst of all this, you have the Hebrew teachings, which say that the Native Americans are Israelites. So during this entire timeline, you got that dancing around, because I know there's more science temples that were Hebrew temples. So you got that concept dancing around the minds of the people.
Let me add to that really quick, right? And shout out to my brother Zion Lex, right? Hebrew Israelite scholar of note. You know, he is a powerhouse. And I hope he corrects me on this if I'm wrong. There's a number of different Hebrew Israelite camps, number of different Hebrew Israelite groups, just like Indigenous, just like, you know, Moorish groups or whatever. Only one of them, to my knowledge, teaches the whole, okay, well, the Native Americans are the 12 tribes, this, that, and the third, or that specific, you know, this tribe is Negroes, the tribe of Judah is Negroes, the tribe of, you know, that is a group called ISUPK. Not all of them teach that. You see what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
This one particular group, ISUPK, teaches that. Yes, sir.
Got you. Okay, so so from there, like we have people like also so, and obviously during this time, like as I stated, you have, for me, I feel like who I heard saying this definitively, right? In and around these times, you know what I'm saying, moving forward, would have been the Moors. The Moors were the first ones coming out their mouth definitively saying, we are the indigenous people of the land. Right? And some groups were trying to take on native identities, and it was causing an issue. And I think it clouded the message that was being said. You know what I mean? Because when I look through the threads and I start to, the nuances are what makes that statement even close to being like, you can find certain circumstances where you can find people of Moorish ancestry who absolutely are also connected to the indigenous tribes. Absolutely. Like, you know what I mean? But an overall statement saying that is misleading. You know what I mean? So,
yes.
So, but I do know that the Moors were the first to start claiming indigenous American status here, right? And that is something that,
what I wanted to add to that, you know,
yeah,
to add a little more detail and context to that, that began to happen. Again, this was a history that you and I lived through, so we were there to see it, right? That began to happen at the advent of my good brother Hakeem Bey and his mooatlantis.com website, when he began to have the online magazines of Moorish Paradigm. And
Mm-hmm.
he was really pushing that whole narrative pretty heavy at that time.
Okay.
And what people did is they bought the lesson package that he was offering and then literally created their own little groups. And that's when you started hearing things like, you know, the Lenape Moors, the this Moors, and the this native Moors, and that native Moors. And that's when you had this huge proliferation of Moorish groups claiming, literally, I'm just going to call it what it is, literally appropriating Native American culture of particular tribes. And so they started calling themselves, come on, you already know, Washita Moors. You got to, this is when this started happening.
And that was probably the biggest of them all, the Washita.
Now, as a point of information, as a point of information, I was there in the summer of 1991 in Cleveland, Ohio, with the late J. Johnson Bey, the leader at the time of the Moorish American Institute. He was a student of the late C.M. Bey. I was there when Sister Tiara Vertice Gauston was there. I was there. I was there. There's other people that I can call up that can attest to the fact, because they were there too with me. And Brother J. Johnson Bey said, yeah, this sister's from Louisiana. She's coming up here to learn from us, and we're going to help her get her land. She was not born into that information. She got it from a descendant, or not descendant, but a student of Charles Mosley Bey in Cleveland, Ohio in 1991. I was there. That's just the fact.
Just the facts. Absolutely. Okay. So, yeah, I know that has been a contention. You know, people, you know, lean on that, the Washita being Moors. But this is kind of where the fusion of people starting to take on the idea that we're the Indians, the Negroes are the Indians. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I'm not saying that's not true. I hope does no one think that I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying, as a collective identity, people have taken that on, and they have removed the responsibility of actual definitive, you know what I mean, understanding. And I even hate to say proof, but, you know, they've removed the basis of what it means to be that.
What they've done, dear brother, to use my analogy, to go back to my analogy about the forest and the trees, what they've done is they've taken 3 trees and said that's the forest.
Yeah. Okay. Got you. So also, another thing that, boom, I got to go back a little bit, because this probably would come a little bit after, you know, this is something that happened in the 70s though, but definitely had a major impact on people, multiple generations. So we're talking about they came before Columbus. Ivan Van Sertima's book.
Van Sertima.
Right? That had a very heavy reverberation, and that was something that when people rediscovered it in the, I guess it would be the early 2000s, it became a heavy conversational piece in terms of people using that to identify as Americans. You know what I mean? I have a lot to say about that, but that could be a whole nother show.
That's that really is.
That could be a whole nother show.
It's something that you could speak to because you've been there, right? And because, number one, you've been there. Number two, because of your background, your family background, and then number three, your field of study, the focus of your field of study. Even if I had a differing opinion or a differing view on this particular topic I'm about to bring up, man, listen, superior wisdom demands submission. So that being said, I may say that the Olmec heads are proof of African presence in the Americas pre-Columbian era. You may say, well, you got to prove that they were African.
Or this is what I would do. I would speak to something I learned as I was there.
Yes.
So based on their religious expression, right? When they deify certain, and this is common amongst Native American tradition, animal what is it?
Anthropomorphic. I know what you're talking about.
Anthropomorphic,
Yes,
exactly.
yes, sir.
So when you're looking at these Olmec heads, what you don't realize you're looking at is an infusion of the jaguar face, which is why it's smushed. Right? And what you can't see from the pictures that they show you online is on top of each helmet is a specific insignia, which represents a specific clan of people. Wow. Right? So a lot of what we attribute to, they'll say, oh, they were baby faces, they were African faces. A lot of that has to do with what they're showing you in terms of they're deifying these kings, these chiefs, right? Yes. So also in one of the museums that you have in San Lorenzo, which is an actual still remaining village, right? And it's the only village in Mexico that still has an authentic Olmec head in the village. The villagers would refuse to let the people take it, right?
Wow.
So it's still there. So in that museum, they have other demonstrations of the dual aspect of how they saw themselves between the animal world and the human world. So they have multiple statues where half of it is an animal and half of it is the human. And this is the same thing they were showing in the Olmec heads.
That's beautiful, brother.
This is what's explained and shown. And there's other things I could get into that deal with high levels of technology, but I'm saving that for my documentary. You know
Praise the Lord. That's beautiful, bro. See, I just learned something. And again, like I was, to the point I was making, right? That from my perspective and my meager portion of the understanding, I may say, well, that's Africoid phenotype. They must be from Africa. And then you come along and say, well, based on one, my family and my studies and for my family, my knowledge of that. Two, being there. Three, my focus of study is that this is what I came up with. I have to defer to you, brother.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they shared with me.
I gotta defer to you. Yeah.
Like when I went there, you have the general tour that you could go on, yes, or you can go get your own person, and I think paid him a couple $100 for the whole week, and he was there with us the whole week and took us places, and he didn't give us the spiel. He gave us, look, bro, I'm not here for that. Give me the real deal.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, right. No, like, because as they try to say things, when you know certain things, you can be like, nah, that's not what it was. Then they be like, oh, okay, I just can't tell you anything. And I got this bread for you. You know what I'm saying? So it's a different experience when you hire your own guide. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes,
but
sir.
I saw a lot of things, none of which, and even in Ivan Van Sertima's book, people take it like these were Africans. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
When really the book states the African influence, right? Which a lot is technology based and things like that. Like, because truthfully, when you understand the Olmec, even where they lived, they wouldn't have been great stone builders because they lived in marshy areas. That's why the heads had to be exhumed from the ground.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they wouldn't have been pyramid builders. They wouldn't have been none of those things just because of the actual terrain they lived in.
Got you.
You know what I mean? So
copy.
So there's a lot of connections that people see the stone heads and they'll know pyramid building and they'll try to put it together. But that was the least of what was going on there. But people look to the Olmecs as proof of Black people was always here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I've never that's not in question. Black people have always been here.
Right.
First to populate the entire planet.
Come on,
you know
brother.
What I mean? First to populate the entire planet.
That's right.
What the conversation is, as I said, is about is the genealogy of the current psychology of today's Aboriginal movements and where they picked up the bits and pieces of that psychology to formulate where they are now. You know what I mean? Wow. So how much another person I feel like played a big role, obviously, Dr. York. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And he was a Moor and he was a Native. You know what I mean?
Right.
He claimed both. So what type of role, could you expand on that possibly if you?
Sure. Well, Dr. York deserves a show all by himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he began, you know, with the quote unquote Orthodox Islam demonstration. He went from that to like a Hebrew demonstration, went from that to extraterrestrial, went from
Mm-hmm.
that to, okay, Moorish / Native American, you know, but that's he did a
He might be
did
the
a lot
template
of
for today's communities. He might
right.
be the template.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Is that it? And I'm glad you said that from a psychological perspective, because it's the whole thing of like produces like. Other people came behind him and said, well, if he could do that, I could do that too.
Mm.
I could put together my own group and call it Native. And I'm going to, as you put it, I'm going to draw different elements. See, during the time period when a lot of these groups were buying from mooatlantis.com and then starting their own groups and calling it Moorish and Native American. And then, you know, and that whole idea of, oh, okay, well, the transatlantic slave trade was a myth. That whole idea started to pop up, and those things started to happen around that time, right? But guess what else they were drawing from as well? The misconception, and I gotta talk about this, the misconception that the Moorish movement is about separatism and creating its own government independent of the United States. That was a misconception. They drew from that too. And you see that element in their demonstration now. See?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And like I've always felt like those demonstrations, a lot of them were based on Native American sovereignty and things of that nature. But
you called it. That's right.
Yeah, but that is all predicated on those nations being in place before the United States or the colonies existed.
There you go. Brother.
And sovereignty is something that a nation, not individuals, the nation is sovereign, not the individuals.
Thank you, brother.
So you can't be a sovereign on your own. Like that's not.
And let's say this too. The whole idea of sovereignty is social. That is social and political. It's socio-political that has legal implications. It's not a legal thing. You know, it's not a legal thing. Let me repeat that again. It's not a legal thing. Even in the United States of America today, right? They think that, you know, and I'm going to apologize in advance if this offends anyone, but ain't nobody learning law from a dictionary. You ain't learning law from Black's Law Dictionary. You're learning some legal terminology. You're not learning law. So that being said, let's look at the Black's Law Dictionary definition of the sovereign power. Sovereign power says, right, it's the power wielded by the sovereign body, which is the citizens. And it says it is enacted or wielded by way of the political process. In other words, voting. That's sovereign power, people. Not disobeying laws already on the books and writing affidavits and challenging people in court. That's not execution or enacting of sovereign power. It's not. That's anarchy.
Yeah. Anael-Bey said they merged Moorish treaties and American treaties.
Woo.
And that was not even the Moors it applied to.
Come on, brother.
Absolutely. So
come on, brother. That's right.
So during this entire time that our people have been coming out of this oppression, you know, and in the midst of all this, you got obviously the civil rights movement happening, and many key players in the civil rights movement were of African descent as well as Native American descent. Correct. Working together. So if like people talk about, can we all come together? We've been doing that. Only recently have we gone through this upheaval where people think we weren't united, you know what I mean, doing things together. Like the identity of Black, like united so many of us under one banner and one cause. Negro, all these things, we've always been together, you know what I mean, and have helped each other. You know what I mean? It just comes a point in time when we need to start working these things out, that we need to be able to self-identify, you know what I mean, as specific people, because that's where the law lies. And that's what's going to save us.
It's deep that you say that, right? Because we, you know how, I mean, it's just like in basic training, right? You get off the bus, now you got somebody yelling at you and you standing toe to toe or neck, shoulder to shoulder with somebody you never met before. 6 weeks later, you invite them to your wedding. Why? Because y'all went through hardship together, right? You went through hardship together. So the whole identifying under the labels Black and things like that is indicative of us uniting out of necessity because of a common experience. Not necessarily an identity, because we weren't, we were born into a world, a social narrative that connects this color skin with servitude. You see what I'm saying? And so we've been forced together because of adverse conditions. And so that's why Turtle Gang exists. The Moorish Science Symbol of America exists because it's okay. We've gotten this far by identifying by a former condition of servitude. Now let's identify in another way. You see what I'm saying? Because we're only going to get so far identifying by a condition. You see? And so that's the struggle we're in right now. You know what I mean? Now, something else you said, which is deep, and I'll just sum it up this way. Unity and uniformity are not synonymous. Look at the Iroquois Six Nation Confederacy. None of them assimilated into the other.
No.
They came to, you see? So we don't got to be uniform to unify. Yeah. We don't got to be uniform. We are not, in the Moorish Science Symbol of America, let me just put this out there. We are not trying to make everybody join the organization.
No, we just have to be open to dialogue and not get caught up in the low-hanging fruit, what we have differences or what we don't, because right now there's, people saying certain things that I could address, but that's just going to change the direction and the energy of the conversation. And that's not, it's not what I'm here for. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
so
right.
You know what I mean? That's a demonstration within itself. And I hope people are aware of it.
To your point, let me say this to your point. I think I know what you're dealing with, right? We all know that low vibration. We know that low vibration. We know it very well. We also know that there's a way that there is a way that it's usually dealt with, right? But the way that we're familiar with dealing with a low level vibration is with a low level response, and that's savagery. We know that too well. We're trying to get away from that, and if you ain't trying to get away from that, you got to stay away from me. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? Because I'll just be real simple. I'm in this organization not because I'm hustling. I don't make money from it. I'm in this organization and in this movement to have conversations like I am right now with my brother. And I'm not trying to convert him. We're not crusaders. You see what I'm saying? Where you got to think like me and act like me and speak like me, or else it's my way or the highway. We're not doing that. That's what we're victims of. We're not doing that. You see? But that low level stuff, get away from me. Why? Because I got a lower self too. And I'm not trying to tickle my demons, so I don't want you tickling my demons.
And what I want people to understand, that the conversation we're having here is a conversation, like people are waking up right now.
For sure.
Right? Whether you think you know or know who you are, wherever you're at, it's people waking up right now. And what they're waking up to is a lot of misleading information.
Yes.
Right? So what's going on now? I'm trying to have a conversation and start a conversation that shows where the psychology of today's groups, right? Not the ones we're talking about, because they've already established their roots and their psychology. I'm talking about today's roots of people who are now claiming to be indigenous, claiming to be Aboriginal, claiming all these things. Like, we know grandma told you this, right? But the psychology that accompanies that comes from a bunch of different houses of study and experiences that have created a a position
Yes.
that is not really conducive to moving into the space you want to move into.
That's a fact,
so
brother.
If we can dissect the phenomena to show where these different emotional and psychological patterns come from, maybe people can navigate through what's going on.
You hit it right on the nose.
A little easier.
You hit it right on the nose. That's the significance. That's what, when you asked me to be a part of this, that's why I jumped at it, because we have to have what you just said about people waking up and seeing all this craziness. It's the little child that gets lost in the amusement park. Which way do I go? I don't know which way to go. I see this, I see that. I don't even know where I'm at. They got to find that. They got to find that map that has that red dot that says you're here.
Yeah.
That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Exactly.
Yes,
so
sir.
I know another major impactful thing that happened in 2007. And that was the announcement of the U.S. support for the Indigenous Declaration of Rights.
Sure.
U.S. support of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Yes.
So when that hit, I saw conversations even within whole communities start to shift.
Yes.
Right? People are aware now that, and they took it for because also, as I said, you have this whole movement within the Moorish community, or if it's rogue elements of the Moorish community, talking about status correction.
Yes.
And
yes. Definitely
identity,
rogue.
right? So now you have the status correction concept being merged with the announcement for the support of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, which empowered people to identify as they perceive themselves.
Yes.
Right? So you have this thought being coupled with this action, and then you get an emergence of people starting to now decide they're going to re-identify, right? And create groups, you know what I'm saying? Create movements, you know what I mean? That are now identifying themselves as indigenous or native or however, autochthonous, whatever word people want to use.
Whatever you want to use.
All synonymous.
And the crazy part about what you're saying, brother, those three words, here's the crazy part. And this might be hard to hear for some people, pardon me. It might be hard to hear for some people, or hard for some people to stomach this, but all of them are all three of those are culturally and socially ambiguous. Every human being on the planet, for the most part, is Aboriginal to somewhere.
Yeah.
It still doesn't tell you much. You see what I'm saying? Lenape tells you a whole lot, though.
Absolutely.
See? Yes, sir. Lenape is specific. Aboriginal, the term Aboriginal is ambiguous. It's just as ambiguous as African.
Mm-hmm. Or Negro.
Or
Black. It's
right.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on in terms of the UN Declaration?
Absolutely.
Rights of Indigenous people? Like anything to add to it?
What ended up happening, with a lot of people, especially who identify with being Moorish or Moorish American, they automatically presume, because it's a declaration. Let's look at the wording. Declaration on the rights of indigenous people. They took that to mean that that's some kind of international law because it came out of the United Nations. It came out of the United Nations, but it's a declaration.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how you're going to run your house. The United Nations can't tell the United States how it's going to run its house.
Mm-hmm.
It's a declaration, meaning what? Meaning that the United Nations recognizes that people have this right. It's not enforceable. You cannot run down on a police officer and show him an affidavit that says, oh, well, hey, the United Nations said. That's not enforceable. Stop. That's not law, people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not law. It's not even international law. It's a declaration. It's not law. You see? But again, like we said before, if you're starting with the wrong psychology and the wrong narrative, what ends up happening? You end up collecting things that agree with your wrong narrative. And it leads
Mm-hmm.
you into further error. And it makes it tough for you to backtrack.
Yeah,
Correct yourself.
absolutely. So that's when
Mm-hmm.
you go on record and you start declaring things, and you're
Come on. Come on.
hanging your hat in places that, you know.
Come on.
So now all this is happening. All this is happening on a, you know, on a world stage in terms of the UN declaration and all that.
Yes.
And then it reverberates within the communities, right? And I don't want to say what the importance of the conscious community that was coming out of Harlem.
Right.
I don't want to act like that was the foundation, but I
Right.
know the role that people like Sonetta played in,
Yes.
you know what I mean, whether you want to say upliftment or dumbing down of our people, you know what I'm saying? Like I know like people looked to that for inspiration, you know what I mean? So a lot of what was going on in New York was feeding a lot of these other communities before they really got an online presence, put it that
That's
way.
a fact.
I'm not going to say they wasn't doing it already, but
That's
before they started to emerge as an online presence, which now gave influence to them beyond just their immediate area.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so something that occurred during that time was when Africa Bambaataa had the Where Were You in 1492 conference, right? And that really got the conversation going. Yeah. And all these things happening, you're starting to get the emergence of we're the indigenous people. We're the indigenous people.
Yes.
And the shift is starting to happen from Africa to Aboriginal America.
Right.
And then you had the explosion of the Hebrews.
Right.
Which kind of pushed the conversation to the side. But while the whole Hebrew Kemet thing was raging,
yes,
there was an undertow of we're Aboriginal.
Right.
That's what was happening. You know what I mean? So by the time all this other stuff died down, you're left with so many people running around here now wanting to challenge the former idea. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of, I like to think like that's kind of what leads us into where we at now. But that demonstration that Africa Bambaataa had, I feel like was very impactful. Do you remember that?
I remember it very distinctly, and you know, I remember the shift you're speaking of, or the transition that you're speaking of, just as, you know, making a very big leap forward as a result of that conference.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and again, you know, apologies if this offends, but again, our people are very trendy.
Mm-hmm.
When you've been deprived of things that other groups and other national groups and other people don't even know what it's like to be without. They don't know what it's like to be without identity. You're talking about a group of people that had to be taught who they are.
Yeah.
That's never happened in the history of humanity. You see what I'm saying? And so, you know, we're so quick to snatch up any little thing and hug it as if it's the whole thing. And so, you know, that's what we are subject to being possessed by fads.
Mm-hmm.
Fashion. It is now fashionable. It's stylish now to be like, yeah, I'm Aboriginal, Indigenous. That's stylish. But there's a motive behind it. That motive behind it is, well, that affords me liberties and rights that you don't have.
Okay. Now, check this out. Now, this is where it all pays off, right? Because what people really are looking for is remedy.
Come on.
They're looking for remedy. And is the remedy lying in, like, just in the heritage? Or is there an actual remedy that lies within knowing how to navigate through this system and being mindful so you can create your own wealth?
Come on, brother.
Right? as opposed to thinking that identifying as something is going to now be your get out of jail, get rich quick thing. You see what I'm
Brother,
saying?
brother, you hit it right on the nose. You hit it right on the nose. You hit it right on the nose. As a matter of fact, we say this, right? Man is the Lord of all the plane and manifest, but he gave up his birthright just to gratify his lowest self. And here we are with all this knowledge and all this consciousness in 2022, and we are ready to sell it all for a reparations check.
Mm-hmm. Whether
See
it's
what
an
I'm saying?
indigenous one
Woo!
or it's an African slave
Come on.
narrative one.
Either way,
People looking for a check.
we just want the check, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. And meanwhile, the communities that I represent and that, you know what I mean,
Right.
aren't having these debates in their head because they are who they are and they're living that life. Know what they're doing? They working. They creating farms.
Come on,
They're
brother.
creating a remedy without even having to ask for it, because unbeknownst to a lot of people, a lot of these communities that are indigenous, native, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these communities, right? The communities that I'm a part of, they're not
Right.
federally recognized.
Right.
They're not getting no money.
Right.
They're just living their culture, right?
Brother, let me
And
say this to to those who identify as Moorish Americans, right? When the Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, "With us, all members must proclaim your nationality," that ain't no paperwork. That's no that is not a legal filing. That's not no paperwork. It's literally what you just said, brother. If you're that and you know what that entails, if you understand the quality and character of a Moorish American, a descendant of Moroccans and born in America, then you'll do what your forefathers did, and you ain't got to ask nobody for nothing. You just do it. You live the life. That's proclaiming, making it known. Filing no paperwork, that doesn't do it. That's not proclaiming. Living the life. If the Moors fed the world for nearly 800 years, what you doing? You got to have it to give it, though. You see what I'm saying?
yeah.
You got to have it to give it.
And like, you know,
wow.
So an individual is stating this is what your boy argued. This is what you don't understand. You're saying our land and resources were stolen, so why shouldn't we be looking for restitutions for work what was done to us? This is the thing. The land you're talking about, the resources you're talking about, were stolen from nations. And guess what? Those actual nations are doing just what you're talking about.
See that?
That's the point I'm making.
See that?
Nobody sounds crazy. It is just like you're speaking from a perspective where you're just not fully informed about what's going on.
There you go.
Nations are doing that, right? So whatever nation you're from, whatever land was taken from your nation, you need to be focused and concentrated on repairing your connection with those people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then assisting and helping them, you know what I mean? If that is the case, what the nation is looking to do, get the land back. Like if that is the actual truth, because each of us as individuals creating groups is not going to get land back.
Right.
So what let me say this too. About?
And let me say this too, dear brother. We ain't get with listen, we're not the Europeans, you know, that became recipients of the Bretton Woods Agreement and the 6-Day War. That ain't us. We're not going to get props for looking good losing. Let me repeat that. Stop trying to get points for looking good losing. Stop with the defeatist mentality and thinking somebody's going to pat you on the head and give you a check. Stop it. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Land was stolen. We need to get the land back. All right. How many of us are making ourselves, how many of us can plant? How many of us know anything about farming? How many of us know anything about horticulture or agriculture? Who is actually making themselves useful even if you got the land?
Mm-hmm.
How about that? If because if we really, really, really believe that, we'd be about the business of preparing ourselves to get it. See,
Mm-hmm.
we just want a handout. That's Negro mentality. We don't know what the wealth really is. The wealth people talk about, oh, House Joint Resolution 192, 1933, and the New Deal era, da 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 da. It took, it exchanged the value, you know, of the from a fixed standard gold and silver coin to that of the faith and credit of the American people. It did that. Guess what that did? It made the people the creditors.
Yep.
You're the value. But we still waiting for debt credit devices from Federal Reserve. Come on, man. You're the value. We're the value. My faith and credit, meaning my labor and my trust, is the value. But we don't really believe that.
Okay, so yeah, the Racial Integrity Act was created so white people wouldn't have to worry about intermarrying with Negroes, because the benefits of marrying an Indian had pretty much run out. Like, you wasn't going to be able to get land and all that because the Indians had lost all their land, right? And these were the Europeans that got accustomed to. So they created a lot of these laws. And like, we think the one drop rule is for us. It was for them to be able to identify who to not intermix with.
Come on,
you know
brother.
what I mean? If they got one drop, don't fuck with them. It's when in doubt, do without. You know what I'm saying? That was something they were teaching to the, you know what I mean, for them to stay away from. You know, it's a whole big, it's a lot. I don't want to get sidetracked, but the remedy that people are searching for, right? I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I had a friend that, you know, we were at Taj Street's classes. I used to go sit over in his classes. We sat there, you know what I mean, took notes. So one of my friends got a ticket, and he was fighting it. You know, he's like, I'm fighting it, whatever it was. He fought it. So he went in there, and he's standing on his Moorish thing, and he's going through the whole thing, and he's, and the judge keeps suspending it and postponing it, and he does this for 2 years. So he finally beats the case, right? Beats the case after going through all this stuff. And after he beats the case, the judge said to him, you could have just beat this on the law. You didn't need all that. I'm a Moorish American, and I this and I that, and going through all the other stuff. He was like, you could have just beat this on the law. You know what I mean? And that's not to take anything from the Moors, because he learned that from the Moors, right? The law aspect of it, what the remedy that actually saved him, he learned it. You know what I mean? He did the extra other stuff trying to demonstrate for the Moors. You know what I mean? Trying to, he was proud of what he learned, but the judge flat out told him, this shit would have been over 1.5 years ago if you just would have came with the law. So what I'm saying is the remedies are there. We just have to be intelligent enough to navigate and find them. Yes, there were many times where back in the day, they burnt our villages down. They did all these things, but guess what? It's not going to happen no more.
Come on, brother.
And it's not going to happen because you're not going to allow it to happen, because once you build it, you're not going to let nobody take nothing from you.
You're not.
We're living in a different time now.
You're not. And
you know
we've been conditioned, and this is another thing we have to admit, and some of the comments are reflecting this. We have to admit that we've been conditioned to be dependent now. It takes a little bit of guts to really own something. Take some responsibility to own something. And we, for too long, have been accustomed to looking good losing.
Like, we know we've been reclassified. That conversation was zipped up in the bag 10 years ago.
We know that.
We know that.
Right.
And guess what? They not going to give you nothing back. They not. It's too much going on. Like, my tribe is from New York. You think they ever, and guess what? We got a suit in against, we put a suit in against Manhattan 9 years ago. You think that's ever going to come to fruition?
Right.
You think they ever going to give that land back? They may give us a portion, but they're not going to give that back. That's unrealistic. It's too much has happened. Right. So we got to start being realistic. You know what I mean? I spoke, you know, my wife's family are going through something like this in New Orleans.
Yes.
Right. Where their land was taken. They know the exact company that did it, and this everything. It ain't like some, I wonder who took our land. No, they know exactly who got it. They still operating a business on it now. Right. So They went through the whole thing, and at the end of the day, they're not making them people give that land up. They got to come to a settlement. Because this man then developed all types of shit on it that far exceeds the wealth. It's a whole bunch of shit going on.
Right.
So they got to settle, and they got to get them people money.
Right. Also, too, let's just keep it. Here's another thing, too. We can't think selfish. This is legacy building. You know, I'll use this as an example. The RICO laws, racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations that the feds developed, right? The feds developed the RICO laws, the 848, to take out the mob. And they announced when they got it passed that it was going to take 30 years to do it. You know what that meant? That meant that they weren't going to be alive. The result, but they did it anyway. You see what I'm saying? We thinking selfish.
Yep. That's why I talked about seventh generation. Like,
yes,
I'm the seventh generation grandson of my grandfather, who was on Fleming Indian Plantation, which is now Flemington, New Jersey.
Wow.
So I'm the seventh generation from that man. He was an Indian slave, right? In a place that we now call Flemington. The place is now a museum, right? Wow. So it took 7 generations for all that to transpire to get me to where I'm at now. Right. It's gonna take 7 more generations to get us back to where we're supposed to be. That's why, you know, like, we don't do this for ourselves. There is no immediate remedy. You know what I mean? When you receive immediate remedy, it's gonna slip through your hands immediately. You know
Here's the other part. I'm glad you brought that up, brother. Right? When Ta-Nehisi Coates was in front of Congress, a year or so ago, talking about reparations, and they and basically the powers that be did the nice political pump fake towards consideration of reparations. Remember that? Right? Yo, listen. I'm not an economist. I'm not an economic expert. But when you look at just very basic things, and this is to your point that you just made, when you look at very basic things like our people, matter of fact, 4 years ago, our people that are classified socially as Black in America, we hit the $1 trillion spending mark back in 2016. A year, we spend $1 trillion and better. Forbes Business School reported that, right? $1 trillion mark, bro. So our issue really ain't money. Okay, but follow me. We spend $1 trillion a year, but we're 98% consumers, meaning we barely produce anything. So we're walking money. We're money with legs on it, right? So that being said, if we don't really produce nothing, meaning we don't have an economy. It's not insulated to where the money circulates amongst us so that we benefit ourselves. What does that mean if we all got a reparations check within the next 24 months? Give it 24 months. Who's going to have the money?
But the point is, it's their money. So even if they give you their money, you're still trapped within their system, because outside of them, like, it's all like the wealth you want is not something that can be given to you.
Thank you, brother. You just said it.
That's what people don't get. If it can be given to you, it can be taken from you.
It's the practicing of principles, and principles are free. I don't need a check to treat Turtle Gang, man. Listen, I need a documentary shot. The guy right around the corner from me is going to charge me this amount of money. Turtle Gang is going to charge me almost double. I'm rocking with Turtle Gang. Why? Because that's my brother. And I don't have a choice in the matter, because that's my brother. See, that's principles. You see? That's principles. Everybody else rocks that way. We don't. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So it don't cost nothing to practice principles. It don't cost nothing to love your brother unconditionally.
Absolutely. Now, like we're talking about remedies, right? And restitution. I know the difference between restitution and reparation. This is the point I'm trying to make. Guess who's receiving restitution? The nations. So until you do all the work to tie yourself back to a nation, and listen to what I'm saying when I build on this nation, until you do that, there is no reparations or restitution for you. They don't give it to individuals.
Nope.
They give it to nations.
That's
and
a
guess
fact.
what? The nations that lose are the ones that pay reparations. Did you know that? The winning nations don't pay the reparations. The one that lose do, because they're the ones that lost.
Right.
Right. So what we're talking about is
That's deep.
like Germany just finished paying off a couple of nations from what was going on.
Haiti's still paying France.
And they're still paying France. They lost. You understand? Like this is way different. Okay.
That's a
you
good
don't
point.
have to join. Well, then if you don't have to join that thing, do the process. What are you waiting on? If you can receive some type of individual restitution, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Like nobody, you don't need anybody else to run down there with you. You don't need to mob up to do it. If you got the remedy for yourself, go do it. Make a video, show everybody else, and everybody's coming. That's how people do. You know what I'm saying? Now, in terms, I want to address something in terms of when people talk about the Dawes list and paper genocide. Like,
shout out to my brother Anael-Bey, man. He's done a ton of research in this area as well. It's one of his, he's similar to you. In terms of this, in terms of a focused study in this area. As a matter of fact, when it comes to this particular topic, as far as indigenous Americans being reclassified as Negro, Black, colored, etc., I would defer to you or him, on this topic. But go ahead, brother.
In terms of like, so the Dawes role, right? And all these roles, right?
Yes.
People will be like, oh, I got family on that. If it ain't your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, your direct begat line, it don't mean nothing. They don't care. It's got to be your begat line. If your aunt's on there, you're not on there. Like, that's just what it is. Because you got to understand, these people are in bed with the United States government. It's not used against you. It's used for the people who made the agreements. If you're not on there, it's because your direct ancestors didn't make the agreements. That's what it means. It doesn't mean like, no, these are United States documents. These are not Indian. The Dawes list is not an Indian document. It's not a native. It's not an Aboriginal. It's not an autochthonous. It's not copper colored document.
Right.
It's a instrument used against the people, and the people that signed are being used against the people that didn't sign. And the people that keep trying to go get involved because they see their name on it, no, that ain't your begat. And that's just the truth. That's why you see things happening where people are getting denied. And then there's certain tribes where if you haven't been active in 2 generations, they're not interested. You understand? And that's for them. Like, they make up their own rules.
Come on.
You know what I mean? But they're also in bed with the United States government, who is influencing what it is they have to say.
There you go.
So that argument, that fight, that is just wasting your time. If your family was on the Dawes list and you're that begat, you would already be in that system. And if you would have fell out of that system, if you're just learning that you were in that and you've been out of it 4 or 5 generations, best of luck getting back into it, because they take everything into consideration: culture, where you live, how you live. It ain't just because you got that blood running through your veins.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's based on an agreement with the United States government.
Yes, sir.
And in terms of paper genocide, like, Walter Plecker was instrumental in what we're talking about, right?
Yes,
Walter
sir.
Plecker.
Yes, sir.
And one of the first families some of the first families that he was dealing with this on were Monacan Indian families, right? I have documents noting him writing about families with the name Branham, saying things about the Branhams. Now, if you know me, my last name is Branham. I am a Branham.
Yes, sir.
You understand? So when people are talking about Walter Plecker, and listen, I done been through that information. I done went all through. Do you know George Washington, one of his slaves her name was Branham? Like I've gone through all these things. I know, like, the Moors talked about denationalization.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that led people right to the Racial Integrity Act.
Yep.
Right? Which is the denationalization actually happening on paper. The census, things of that nature. People wasn't thinking about even looking at things from a perspective until certain things, vocabularies were being said by Moors.
There you go.
Before certain things were being said by the Nation of Islam. Before certain things were being said by the 5% Nation. And right now, today, we have a conglomerate of different pieces of philosophies that come from all these groups that predate the ones now that have created the fabric of their tapestry that is what they stand on. And that's what I wanted to show today. But there is errors in some things.
Yes.
Because everyone got errors and holes in their shit. Oh, yeah, then you weave in grandma said, and now you have a full meal, a full blanket, a full, you know what I mean? And it's coming under the identity of Aboriginal, when all these people that were having these conversations as we move through, like, these terms were being used loosely the entire time. It's not like this is a new phenomenon. And then another thing I think had a big impact was Abdul introducing the idea of etymology.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
Etymology kind of empowered people in a way.
It did. But people took it out of context.
Yeah, but they took it out of context.
They took it out of context. They think etymology, or the etymology of a word, is synonymous or superior to the definition of a word. They're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same.
Yeah.
You know, etymology is showing how a word developed in use.
Mm-hmm. So it actually defines the change it's gone under throughout the time.
That's it, brother.
Yeah, in reverse.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So, the government influencing tribal governments is an absolute negative, but you have to understand, when these tribal governments made these agreements with the United States, they agreed to have the United States be their power of attorney.
That's fact.
So anybody that's had any experience with having a power of attorney, I did personally.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? My two of my aunts had power of attorney over my home. My mom was sick, so my house was put into my name and my two aunts. This is when I was young, 14, 15. So obviously my aunts had the power of attorney. Before I could do what I wanted to do with my house, I had to go to my aunts and say, I need you to sign these papers. Now, if my aunts wasn't good people and didn't feel and was whatever, they could have been like, nope, I ain't signing it. And whatever you want to do, you have to run it through us.
Right.
No, they did the right thing. You know what I mean? They signed my house over, and guess what? My dumb ass sold it. And guess what? Guess what? We talk about reparations, we talk about our ancestors. Many of our ancestors came out of hard times, right? Came out of slavery.
Yes.
Bought their freedom.
Yep.
And within 2 generations had farms and owned land. Wasn't looking for no reparations. They had homesteads, built communities,
whole cities,
and cities. And were some of those cities attacked? Tulsa, yeah, but that was just one of hundreds.
Correct.
Right? Our ancestors did all that. Then guess what? Civil rights came, integration came, and we lost all of that. So everything that we're
nearly
asking voluntarily. So everything that we think we're asking for in terms of reparations, we had already accomplished so much, and we were tricked into giving it all back.
How about that?
Yeah, that's a part of history that people are overlooking.
Yes.
Like our desire to have what this one had, we lost our own. Because a lot of these communities, even in the 60s, 50s, 60s, they knew they was indigenous.
Yes.
They knew they was from Africa with the families that were from Africa.
Yes.
These people knew who they were. You know what I'm saying? That's why grandma could tell you who she was before the internet made it popular. That's why
Right.
there were Moorish communities all throughout North America before the internet made it popular. It's some people
Right.
that never even heard of the Moors until the internet.
That's a fact.
You know what I'm saying? So they couldn't know the full depth of their contribution,
Right.
you know what I mean? Both positive and negative. But every nation, every group of people has positive and negative contributions to their communities.
That's fact.
You know what I'm saying? That's
fact.
like we're asking people to be something other than human. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Something other than Homo sapiens sapien. And that's another part of the conversation. Right? That's another part of the conversation.
That's a fact. That's a fact, bro.
Yeah, we have major everything. We had communities all over, just like we had communities all over the planet. So when we talk about people migrating from different places on the planet, and we know and understand that the so-called black man occupied the entire planet, why, if I say that my people migrated from what would be considered Siberia at one point, why do people think of today's modern Siberians and tie me to that? And why don't they think of people like the Negrito? You know what I mean? Why they don't think about the other melanated people who occupied the planet everywhere? You know what I mean? Why? Because they're trying to weaponize thought.
Bro, that which, oh man, you said so much there. I'm looking for a particular book that especially members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, or members, those that identify as Moorish Americans need to have in their library. You need to have this book.
Mm-hmm.
The Unknown Arabs, right? This book speaks in a very scientific way to the term Asiatic or the term Afro-Asiatic, right? Like what you just said. Like we're trying to look, once again, we're thinking very shallow.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at, it's just like, you know what it's like? All right. It's like watching an old period flick of ancient Greece. And all the actors are pale and speaking with a Shakespearean English accent.
Mm-hmm.
See how crazy that sounds when you say it? But we're socialized into, it must be authentic because they've got Shakespearean accents, knowing darn well that Greeks don't sound like that and never did, right? So we're looking at ancient times with modern eyes, and not just modern eyes, Eurocentric eyes, right? So it never occurs to us that the original Arabs look just like you.
Mm-hmm.
That the ancient inhabitants of ancient Siberia look just like you.
Now check it out. If you actually do something as simple as a Google search, you could find those same Siberians still there. Still there. Turtle. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Like that's what happens when you think when I went to Mexico, I got off the plane, I seen us. You think I saw you as soon as I got off the plane? No. I had to hit the outback. I had to get to certain places and boom, ran into whole communities look just like you. You think they standing there waiting for you at the airport?
Nah.
No. when I'm in Mexico, I'm at Teotihuacan, right? And you walk through before you get to the actual pyramid site, you got to walk through like a little lobby thing, that little makeshift, and they want you to buy all their little things there, right? And they tell you, don't buy from the people because this or that. I'm like, oh shit. So now we get there, and the people that they're telling us not to buy from are the real people that they can't stop from coming in there and selling their stuff because it's really their land. So they tell us, don't buy it from them, buy it from them. They got the real stuff. When I can clearly see these are the real people. I'm spending my money with the real people. I gave you my money to get into these people's place to go pay homage to them and walk up on these pyramids and see what they saw. And now you're telling me not to spend my money with them. I'm buying blankets. I'm buying everything from these real people. You know what I mean? Like
that, bro.
That's the truth of things. When you travel and get to see things for yourself, changes everything.
Changes everything. I mean? That's right, brother. That's right, brother. That's powerful testimony right there. You know what I mean? When you can go there and see for yourself, and you're like, wait a minute, that's my brother.
and have experiences like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, you know, it's so much. But yeah, let's get back to, like, you know,
Yes.
we speaking on obviously, like, you know, there's a lot of things that influence today's mind, the psychology of it. You know, people are hurt, they're angry, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
They lean on things when they benefit them, and they lean away from them when
When
they
they
don't.
don't.
You
Right.
know, that's the approach with science.
Yes.
You know, all these conversations are, one moment DNA proves this, but then when you say, well, it also proves that, it's, well, that's the white man's shit. And,
Right.
and
Right.
then
Right. Right. Right.
they'll
Right.
take a book used to prove something. They'll say that you learned your shit from a white man. Then they'll take a white man's book to prove that you learned something from a white man. So it's like a lot of, like, that's the psychology of it. Like, to even get
Yes.
caught up in that stuff is, you know what I
But,
mean?
but the methodology you're describing is literally anti-scientific,
Mm-hmm.
right? The scientific method is, okay, I begin with a hypothesis. Okay, I think this is that. Now, what I have to do is courageously test my hypothesis. Maybe I'm dead wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta be okay with it, right? But what do? We take the anti-scientific route. We say, I think this is that. And then we hunt only for the things that agree with our hypothesis. That's not scientific.
No,
That's not scientific.
absolutely. Well, I mean, at this point, I like, people are guided by emotion, and,
Yes.
you know, like, it, you
Yes.
know, there's things that I've had to realize that, you know, some of my elders were wrong about. You know what
Yes.
I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
I have elders that, like, I know more about the history than they do. And that's
Yes.
just what it is. I
Yeah.
mean, I came in a time where we had access to so much more. You know what I mean? Even the fact that we can travel and go sit with other people.
Right.
Like, my aunt talks about when she used to go up the mountain
Mm.
to being in the, you know, with our family that was living up the mountain still in these Indian communities,
Yes.
right? Whereas we were living more or less in the city. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? She
Right.
say how it took hours and hours to get up there. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm.
how it was, she didn't enjoy it. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, I don't want to go. Couldn't stand it. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
we're able to look, I'm able to look at it from a whole different perspective. And now when I go up there, like, it's a whole nother perspective, because guess
Right.
what? Them same communities are still up there.
Ain't that something,
You know
bro?
what I mean? They're still there. And they're actually doing the work that everybody is talking about wanting to do. Like, everybody is talking about, we need to tell our narrative, and we need to do this, we need to organize, you need to get your thing. And there's actually communities that started this process in the 60s. And much of what we're talking about now
Yes.
has come to fruition
Yes.
for many of these communities.
Yes.
And people can learn from that,
Right.
rather than try to tear these communities down
Right.
because of what you perceive them to be or not be, because they're just realistic in their endeavors.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? Everybody can't help everybody, but we can all help ourselves, and we can land, like, we could teach, like, United States go to war, or the United States has situations where they will send people to teach
Yes.
a nation
Yes.
how to, you know, properly navigate through this war.
Right.
But they don't get involved.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's many ways for people to assist other people without doing it for you.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? Because this journey here, when we're talking about people trying to return to their indigenous, Aboriginal origins and identities, it's going to be different for everybody, because everybody faces different obstacles. Yeah,
right.
Collectively, we all were denationalized. We all had our identities changed and all that. But your road back is going to be very different.
Right.
You know what I mean? Depending on the states you're in,
and
family situation.
Here's another point. We're descendants of those people that were denationalized and reclassified and made, literally made culturally ambiguous and historically ambiguous, right? That means we're a new people, like it or not. We're tied to the ancient times. We're definitely tied back to our forefathers, but we're a new people. So our road forward isn't going to look exactly like it was the one we left.
Mm.
You know, that's to your point. It's
Mm.
it's not going to look exactly that way. We're not trying to go backwards. We're honoring those that came before us. You see what I'm saying? We're honoring them. We honor that because that's where we came
Absolutely.
from. That's our ties. You know, we honor that. We honor our forefathers. We honor our ancestors. But we're moving forward. We're new people. You know? Yeah, we're new.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing, like, as we move forward and we discover who we were and what we were connected to, right?
Yes.
We have to have the courage and the, insight to be able to reach back and grab the things that are going to help propel us forward, right?
That is the Sankofa.
And
That's
and
right,
this
brother.
this the thing. I know I'm not the same people as my ancestors were culturally, like
Right.
like the way I express myself. Like so many things are different because of colonization. Like I
Yes.
can't sit up and act like that didn't happen and
Right,
jump
brother.
back into my ancient self. Whatever I move
Right.
forward with is going to be a blend of the two. You know what I'm saying? And that's like when you say we're new people, like we're not like there's something called continuity, right?
Yes.
So when you can
Yes.
maintain a certain continuity, you can be the same
Yes.
people that your people was before you,
For
right?
sure.
But when your
Yes.
timeline is interrupted and you become a whole different person, right? Then coming back to find out who you truly were, right? Your continuity was disturbed, right? So
Brother,
we're putting pieces back together,
there's
and
the
it's
world
creating
famous.
a new picture.
That's a fact, brother. There's the world famous, he just recently passed away, world famous spiritualist out of Burkina Faso. His name is Malidoma Some. Malidoma was kind of like stolen away from his village, the Dagara village when he was young and educated in France. And then he technically escaped there and went back to his village after a number of years and said, "Hey, I'm back." Basically, they were like, "Yeah, we can't let you in. You got too much of them on you. You could destroy us."
Mm.
And then they had to meet about it. So this is again to your point. They had to meet about it, and then they said, "You know what? On one condition, we'll let you back in. You got to go through the initiation you would have normally went through at age 12."
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That's deep. That's deep.
and that's much of what what we're speaking on. Like
Yeah.
moving forward, there's going to be certain things that you know, and then to be able to honor those who have maintained that. You know what I'm saying? For to even to be a beacon of light for you to look
Yeah,
and see, because
they kept the doors open for
yeah,
us.
because we could talk about we could be talking about everything about who we are. That's right,
Yep.
Watchung, New Jersey. Absolutely.
Mm.
Shaka Maxim Golf Course. So I lost my train of thought. My bad. So yeah, this car I seen Watchung. I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. But so yeah, let me get back to my bullet points.
Right.
Make sure where we at. So all right, so recently, just to get back to the topic,
Yes, sir.
dealing with we've also had influences, people like, I like to think at one point in time, Ali Muhammad was bringing a lot of powerful
Yeah.
information
Yeah.
that was dealing with Central America,
Yes.
right? And there's a body of people who gravitated towards that, and I can see his teaching is in a lot of people. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? I can see bits and pieces of all these teachings in different groups. You know what I
Right.
mean? Different influencers.
Yes.
Obviously Chief Warhorse, you know
Yep.
what I mean? Her
Yep.
emergence
Yep.
really started pushing people into like, oh shit, yeah, we look at her. Oh yeah, we are, right? But Chief Warhorse also talked about we came here, what? On 2 ships, slave ships, and entrepreneurship, right?
Ooh.
That was her term, saying that we came here to get busy, like we came here. You know what I mean? Even she doesn't say we're from here, but a lot of
Right.
people took her lead and piggybacked off her. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And Chief Warhorse, she was very active in the civil rights movement. You know,
Right.
she's been active in multiple movements leading up to what happened, with the flood.
Right.
So after the flood, she had already been involved in these type of grassroots organizations. So after the flood, it gave her the opportunity to reorganize the tribe down there. Because at that point in time, they needed people to start going into communities and taking censuses and gathering information.
Right.
You know what I mean? As a result of what happened with Katrina.
Right.
So she used that to, as I say, reorganize her community as a tribal community. Nice. You know what I'm saying? And nice. People kind of follow that journey. But we have a community right in South Jersey, the Nanticoke Lenape, where at one time had even called themselves Moors for political reasons. Because it availed them to different rights. You know what I'm saying?
Let me show you how deep that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, for those that identify as Moorish Americans, one of the biggest mistakes that many of us made, is not being able to properly identify nationality in proper context. I like how you just put that. You said they identified as Moors for political reasons, right? The name, like in our teachings, we say, what is your nationality? Moorish American. Why are we Moorish Americans? We're descendants of Moroccans born in America. Okay, right? Nationality is socio-political in nature, not legal. It's socio-political. Nationality determines political status. It's social in nature, right? We say black, according to science, means death. What science? Sociology is the science. Like green means go, red means stop, yellow means caution. All of that is the science of automating a society. That's sociology. And sociology is the foundation for political power. So that's dope that you put it that way, because that's the proper context of nationality. Many of us went the wrong direction looking at it from a legal perspective. We were chasing the wrong thing. And when you do that, you're led in the wrong direction. You come to wrong conclusions.
Okay. So yeah, and earlier you brought up something briefly you want to talk about in terms of Meredith Quinn.
Ooh.
Would you like to share a little bit of that information? Because once again, this is where the two communities intersect once again. And like, this is also why I'm sitting here with a Moorish American. I'm Lenape. I'm sitting here with a Moorish American. But guess what? If you listen to his talk, we shared a lot of the same experiences. You know what I mean?
Actual fact.
The phenomena, the you know what I mean? And that's what unites us. So this is another phenomenon I would, because I haven't met too many people who not only know who Meredith Quinn is, but actually read his work. So
yes, sir.
You're one of them. So if you want to speak on that.
Meredith Quinn's research, I mean, see, we like to talk about certain kinds of information being dangerous. What makes, see, what we're in a war. We understand that. We just don't, most of us can't identify how we're being attacked. So some sociologists call it a silent weapons in a quiet war, right? It's an ideological war. It's a war of narratives. That's what it is, right? So anything that challenges the narrative, you got a problem. You got a problem. I was having this conversation earlier today with someone about, I'll give you a quick example about challenging narratives and the cost of it, right? Back when Bush was president and they invited the Sixers to the White House for Father's Day. And what's his name? Or the Bulls, not Sixers, the Bulls, right? Sure. And see, I'm drawing a blank and I'm getting old, right? Who was the famous player out of Chicago?
Jordan.
Jordan didn't go.
Yeah.
He didn't go. And so the reporters asked him, why didn't you go? He said, it's Father's Day. I had to spend time with my family. Bush is a family man. He understands. That's what he said. Not long after, what happened? What happened to him? Jordan's father slumped his car on the side of the highway.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So listen, the control of narrative is important.
Yeah.
That being said, Meredith Quinn's research, dangerous. Why? Because in a very powerful way, it challenges the narrative that established the social foundation for what we see as America today. When
Mm.
he says, and he is native born, Lakota, right? And he says, oh, many of the American tribes had treaties with the Moors.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. Let's stop for a second. If they had treaties with the Moors, how can we as Moorish Americans say all of the Native Americans are Moors? How you have treaties with yourself?
Mm-hmm.
All right, now let's continue. So he says, yeah, there were treaties, right? And a big part of the massacres of Native Americans and eradication of whole tribes and things like that had to do with evidence or people living with the memory or had the memory of that history. They had to eradicate it. And Meredith Quinn went so far as to even talk specifics about names of certain treaties and specifics about Muhammad Az-Zagal, right? Who literally capitulated, and that is the fall of Granada. When the Moors fell at Granada, he capitulated to Ferdinand and Isabella for $17 million in gold. That's actual history.
Yep.
So here you got a Lakota man talking about that, and that's connected to, come on.
Yep. And there's a treaty between, the Pueblo and the Moorish Empire that sat in New Mexico.
Yes.
So for me, now when I discovered Meredith Quinn, you know what I'm saying? What I received from spending time with the Moors, like if I could just set the standard. Yes, what I received and what I felt was most valuable was the education I received in law, right? Just the mindset of looking into law and understanding it.
Absolutely.
As much of an understanding as I got, that's the individual's level of comprehension. But the fact that to focus on that and to be aware of that, right?
Yes.
So, I have utmost respect to the Moors for showing me the value in knowing law.
Yes,
right? Because that bleeds through across many lines, right? So what I noticed about Meredith Quinn, he was moving much in the same manner that a Noble Drew Ali would move. You know what I'm saying? Any one of these people that could be considered a prophet. He was a medicine man. He was a historian. He was a indigenous lawman. Like he represented Wounded Knee, the combined cases of Wounded Knee in international court. So he was, everything Dr. Sabi was, he was all of that. You know what I'm saying? So he was a world-renowned Lakota medicine man that also practiced indigenous law, right? And I know people want to give all these different tribes bad raps and say they stole our land. I'm still trying to figure out where any of these tribes actually stole land from us.
Right.
Best I can remember, we was all fighting off the Europeans. You know what I mean? All the way up until the late 1800s. At different times, we was all fighting them. We just did it earlier. They did it later.
It's the truth.
I understand that some people want to blame everything on them, but I know this man, the things he spoke of, he even went on to say that, and this blew my mind. He said the majority of Indians don't know they're Indian. So now, this man don't look like us, but there has been a template for what the Native American Indian looks like, right? Yes. And when you're looking at one based on the narrative, that's an Indian.
That's
know it, right? But so for this man to say the majority of Indians don't know they're Indian, what is he really saying? Who is he speaking of?
He's saying that Brother Norris Branham fits the actual narrative, and that there's an overreaching Eurocentric narrative that denies that.
And when they speak of them having European ancestry, like this man spoke of so much. He spoke about how these people ain't the real Christians. They don't even celebrate the Sabbath on the right day. This man go in on who you would call the white man.
That's a fact.
Like, yo, this man, like,
that's a fact.
Great read. People can get a hold of his book. I don't know if it's available, whatever. But Meredith Quinn, you just look him up, and he drops so much information pertaining to the history of what was going on here in the Americas, ancient and modern. You know what I mean? And
brother, I'm so glad that you. I didn't know if you were going to bring his name up. I'm so glad you did.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I learned a lot reading his book. Watching his videos. I still got all his videos. You know, I knew they wouldn't be up long, so I downloaded them. I got them all in archive. Maybe I'll share them one day. How do you spell it? It's Quinn, is it?
Yes.
Meredith Quinn.
That's right. I believe his book Keeper is still online.
Timekeeper. Yeah, but it's not a book like it's not an easy read.
No, it's not. That's a fact.
It's far from an easy read.
Yes.
But he talks about the Indian schools he attended and how people were being killed for speaking their language.
Yes.
Speaks about a lot of things, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's definitely a good book for those of you who are really interested in people telling their own narrative.
Come on.
You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right. Now, for those, and you know, for those people who are, you know, on the indigenous Aboriginal side that would call Afro-Islamic heritage, in other words, Moorish heritage, propaganda, Meredith Quinn didn't think so.
Yeah.
See, he didn't call it propaganda.
Yeah.
He called it a shared history.
Yep. And he identified them as being allies of American Indian nations. That were his exact words.
Yes.
So I know that when I've had conversations with different Moors, I know who I can have certain levels of conversation with.
Yes, sir.
And who I can't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that's actual fact. Meredith Quinn stated that the Moors who controlled the rest of he stated they controlled the rest of the world. They controlled the rest of the known world.
Right.
And they were responsible for many of the laws that govern us. Meaning they taught the Europeans civilization, culture, and now those Europeans were imposing their laws and their rules on us, which they learned from the Moors.
That's it.
You know what I mean? So there's a long history that definitely connects different groups.
Yes, sir.
From all over the planet.
Yes,
you know what I mean? And I think the more people get past the like, I hope you all whoever truly internalizes that you have Native American ancestry, American Indian ancestry, Aboriginal ancestry. I hope you're past the point where you're still trying to convince yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because that's a conversation, and it takes a while for you to get past that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But there are many of us that have, you know, many people who have gone through that chamber, and that once you get beyond that, proving it to yourself, that's when you start moving like that.
That's
right. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times people need others to agree with them so they can feel confident in what they believe. You know what I mean? But this is where the genealogy comes to, you know, fruition. And that would be like the last element on this sandwich that you throw in there. You throw in the genealogy, you know what I mean? And all these elements we've been talking about tonight are what has created the cultural handbook for today's Aboriginal community.
Yes.
But what is truly what's missing from this is the connection with the Aboriginal communities that have been continuous.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? So everything that's going on now, when people start to see the value in those communities that are around them, whether they look like them or not, because the truth is, if you come to any of these communities humble, they're going to accept you.
Yes,
they may not accept you as their family, but they're going to extend their openness to you, and you'll be able to learn. But if you come in there going, I'm the real Indian, and you a goddamn fake, and you stole my land, you're not gonna get nowhere. And at the end of the day, it's about people who have all been oppressed coming back together and not standing against each other.
There you go.
But identifying their differences and coming together, even if it is to discuss things that some points might be uncomfortable.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. That's fact, brother.
That's what it's about. So,
brother, how many times online or other places you and I have had points of contention, and that doesn't change the brotherhood?
No. Honestly, so this is how real life shit happen. So, my job, I have to confront people at times. You know what I'm saying? And when you confront people in compromising positions, their egos jump to the forefront as a defense mechanism. They get aggressive. So it's very confrontational. My job is to de-escalate confrontation.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Some people you really can't.
Right.
You really can't. So things happen. Things boom, boom, boom. Now, I also live in a community where the same people who I might have to confront at my job, I can see walking out in the, in the community.
Yeah.
This happened to me today. There's someone who I had a confrontation with a day or two ago that made aggressive threats and all that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I now see in the store, and I'm like, yo, we good today? Ooh. You're like, nah, we good, bro. We good. Everything's good, man. I had to take some time to do. You know why? Because, like they teach me in my job, you don't know what somebody coming to you with. His girl could have just left him, and then y'all walk around the corner and you bump into him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You don't say, excuse me, and you don't know he carrying that on him.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? So now it all come back to psychology. So, we all been through something. And I think that this Black experience, right? This Negro experience should bring us together. You know what I mean? We shouldn't be arguing about, were you an African slave? No, listen. We was all enslaved.
And we all have the American experience, brother.
Yeah, we all had this experience. And that's what should be uniting us. You know what I mean? I think we've gotten past the point where people are arguing over jurisdiction and things. Like, I don't hear that argument no more. I don't hear that as much anymore. Who got jurisdiction over the Americas?
Right.
So, you know what I mean? Things take their time and take their, things take their course, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But I think, right now what we're trying to demonstrate is people being able to, have conversations that don't necessarily come from the same backgrounds. But even now, I have an understanding of the Moorish Science Temple in a different way than maybe someone who hasn't taken the time to really look at it and be able to see the difference. Like, I feel like I have a better understanding of what the Moorish Science Temple is and what it was set up to be and to do, which is why I can understand why you'll have people of Native American ancestry, like my uncle, who look towards the Moorish Science Temple for guidance.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? In lieu of having a tribe, a functioning tribal government that can provide him with that structure. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha. I understand.
See what I'm saying? So, like my history, I explained it to Asir. I'll explain it to you. My uncle, he was a student of Sun Ra. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, this is in the 80s.
Yeah.
He was a part of his band. He was the light man and a DJ.
Wow.
Right? So, Sun Ra used to keep all his lighting equipment at my uncle's house. My uncle actually made it for him.
Nice.
They also used to have meetings at my uncle's house.
Wow.
My uncle's entire house was covered in Kemetic glyphs, 8-foot scarab beetle on the eastern exterior of the house facing the ocean.
Wow.
You know what I mean? All types of things. And it was explained to us that the beauty of Kemetic culture was as close to our culture. You know what I mean? Dealing with pre-dynastic Kemet. So that was a big part of our rearing. Like, we're not a part of traditional Indian communities, but we know who we are.
Yes.
So just to maintain some type of connection to indigenous people,
no doubt.
That's where Kemet came, because we looked at them and they looked red like us.
That's right, brother.
See what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So it wasn't that we thought we were those people. We just identified with those people.
Absolutely.
They got bows and arrows. You know what I'm saying? We know that to be loosely a part of our, you know what I mean? Like psychologically, you identify with those people. So we had these type of paintings in my aunt's house and all that. And so my uncle, he was active in the Asbury Park community.
Yes. Okay.
Anael-Bey.
Nature. Yeah. Nature. Yes, sir.
Yeah. He was. My uncle was a part of that.
Got you.
Set. You know.
Got you. Yes.
So he ended up moving down south. But anyway, you know, I grew up watching him demonstrate. You know what I mean? Getting pulled out of cars.
Yeah.
Beat up by the police.
Yeah.
You know, we watched that as kids. You know what I mean? So that was our experience young with the Moorish Science Temple.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not, you know, it doesn't say it left a good taste in our mouths. Seeing, you know, going through these experiences, you know what I'm saying?
That's fact.
But at the same time, we're Black people in America, so these experiences are happening anyway. So you don't got to hang it on just because he was demonstrating as a Moor. That shit happening anyway. You know what I'm saying? It's going to happen even more when you try to fight back.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he was trying to demonstrate and fight back.
Right.
So, you know, it wasn't like no malice or anything.
Right.
And then later on, as I got involved in what was going on up here in New York, that's when I reintroduced myself to the Moorish paradigm.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? And while I was in those classes, I identified, you know, I said, okay, I got African in me, but I'm Lenape.
Right.
I feel more comfortable identifying that African as a Moor. You know what I'm saying? Why not? You know what I'm saying? So as I indulge in those studies, I, you know, at times will call myself the Lenape Moor. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It got to a point where I felt like I was being asked to decide. You know, I was told by someone who I respected, yeah, we all Moors. I'm like, yeah, I get it. We all Moors. Yeah, you know, but there's different. Okay, I get it. All right, I'm not going to argue. Okay, fine, we're all Moors. It's just like saying we're all humans or whatever the case.
Right.
But when it got to the point where it was like, you're not Lenape, you're a Moor, that's when I was like, I got to leave it alone.
No doubt.
I got to step back, because now you're trying to change, like everything that I've been taught by y'all about identities being changed. Now you're trying to change my identity.
Somebody
felt like that was hypocritical.
Whoever told you that was being was applying crusader mentality, and that's against what the Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught. Bottom line, that's against it. You know, and I'll share this one. Then I gotta cut loose. This was a powerful bill.
Absolutely.
But I'll share this. Right. From the ancient time, we're talking about, and this is how we teach it in terms of history. Even our brothers and sisters in West Africa, shout out to Sister Dana Marnichi, shout out to Professor Tariq Berry, because they confirmed this. Sister Dana Marnichi got over 30 years of field experience in West Africa, in East Africa, in Southern Arabia. They confirmed this. The people there in West Africa say that they're descendants of Canaan, which is ancient Canaan. So, okay, cool. That being said, we're talking Canaanite to Moabite to Moor, right? Now, at that point, we're talking ethnicity. But then in later years formed kingdoms, so it became socio-political, right? So, in other words, the Moroccan Empire was an African diasporic entity. Many different tribes, many different subcultures, right? That is mirrored in the quote-unquote African-American today. That diasporic nature, right? So the Moorish Science Temple of America, recognizing that diasporic history, right, is demonstrating a structure by which all of us, or many of us, can come together unified and still be ourselves. So whoever told you that was going against the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali. You see what I'm saying? Going against. We have an actual history of people from different cultures taking out nationality cards and being a member during the time of Prophet Drew Ali, while he was in the flesh. So yeah, whoever told you that, they weren't in their studies.
Absolutely.
Or they apply the European psychology of it's got to be this way or the highway. The whole
Yeah,
crusader mentality.
absolutely.
Yep.
So, bro, I want to thank you for coming on. Hopefully,
So,
we'll be able to have we'll be able to continue this discussion at another time. Once again,
but we got to
thank
do a
you.
part 2 to this because there's a whole lot
Absolutely,
we ain't covered.
absolutely, absolutely. So,
Yes,
in your greeting,
sir.
I'll say Islam to you
It's
more.
brother,
All
man.
right.
OCO to you, brother.
OCO, Anisha.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for having, for coming on the show. And I'm gonna wrap it up a little bit, but thanks again for stopping through. And
Oh, for
great
sure.
build, man. I enjoyed it. Thank you very
Absolutely,
much.
brother, man. We'll talk.
All right.
Peace.
All right. So yeah, that's good, brother. So I seen a couple of questions in here that I feel like I should address. So it says, so Turtle Gang's Native American uncle studied comedic science. Well, so um like this is to understand, like in the 70s and the 80s, what people was going through in terms of their identity. And for generations in a lot of these Native American families, a lot of things weren't talked about because the elders didn't want to talk about it. It was sensitive. You know what I mean? They experienced things that the younger generations didn't. So the older generations didn't speak about a lot of things. So a lot of us were left kind of knowing who we are, but not knowing a lot about it, not knowing enough to draw on it, right? So you got a whole generation of people that were a product of that. Like my grandfather forbid any of our Indian history to be spoke in the home because he felt like identifying as that was going to make life harder for us because he saw things that were going on. Just like my mother's experience things that I didn't experience, you know what I'm saying? Because she grew up in a harsher time. You know what I mean? My son, his experience, he didn't see the experiences I saw because I made sure he grew up in a better situation. So the same can be said in terms of a period in time where youth were not being educated on who they were. You know what I'm saying? A whole nation of people weren't being educated. So people were seeking education in different places. Some people joined this group, some people joined that group. Had nothing to do with them trying to change their identity, had something to do with them trying to take on a philosophy that was going to empower them. So my uncle, because of his interests, as I told you, he was a DJ and he was an electrician. And he met Sun Ra, who was a musician. And by being around Sun Ra and Sun Ra's impact on him, he introduced him to the studies of Kemetic culture and more science. So Sun Ra was a very influential, famous person. If you're not familiar with who Sun Ra is, look Sun Ra up. Okay, he was a musician, traveled all over the world. So by being with this man, my uncle became a part of his temple, and their information was based on heavily on Kemetic culture. So my uncle introducing this to the family, the family like, oh, we Indians, that's not our culture. But when you know your culture and you start to see the similarities in things, you're like, oh, okay, I'm cool with that. Them people look like us. And we're talking about, a reddish people, how the images were being presented to us. It's no big deal. It wasn't like we were saying we're Egyptian. We just saw the beauty in the culture. You know what I'm saying? So being that you was native up until 1978, you didn't have the right to practice your culture. So many of us, by the time these generations came about, we had been out of the culture. So you're looking for something to fill that void. So that's how my uncle became a part of the Moorish Science Temple. Didn't change his lineage, didn't change who his ancestors were. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how that is supposed to make sense or not make sense. It's what it was. Had nothing to do with him teaching us who we were. It was taught to us like it was a political movement for people of color, for black people. Now, can you say that your uncle's practices with that of the Moorish Science Temple of America or just some idea adopted by people that identified as Moors? See, I think I think as the brother, as Sharif explained, people were taking a lot of what was being taught out of context. You know what I mean? Like, I could be a Moorish American and pronounce my nationality, and it would be Lenape, because that's my nationality. But I could still be enriched by the paradigms or the political aspect of the group. I think it's more than like I don't think it's primarily ethnic based. If you understand, it's a political, more of a political movement. You know what I mean? Yeah, Noble Drew Ali said he had some Cherokee, and I'm sure he did. That's what he says. You know, we at a point now where we had a point now where people need to start digging into or continue to dig into their own history and really get the most out of that. And for those of us who are coming up against blocks and they feel like they can't go any further, you know what I mean? You could also take the time to start to introduce yourself to some of the cultures. So while you may be stuck trying to dig back, you can still be taking that time to familiarize yourself with the culture until you actually find out the exact tribe or clan you're from. You can still be learning and be on your journey. And that might open up other aspects of what you need to know. You know what I mean? Learning more about the culture might avail more things to you. The tribe is not from Delaware. No, the tribe is called Delaware because Lord de la Ware, who was a Frenchman, sailed up what is now called the Delaware, and they labeled the Indians who lived along that body of water, that river, as the Delaware. Now we call ourselves Lane Lenape, which is a it's a title that means real people, real men, pure people, and it's actually the name of all the tribes from Virginia on all up to Canada along the eastern seaboards. All of those people are Lenape people. They just go under their location names. The main body of Lenape retain the title because they are still in the homeland. The ones who are out in Oklahoma, those are the Lenape that uh, relocated in Oklahoma and various places. So those are different groups of Lenape. Those are the recognized groups. So this is the thing. When people talk about, yeah, even Shinnecock and Pequot, they're all Lenape people, yes. So when people talk, when you hear me talk about migrations, you got to understand that when the people who these nations here are descendant of, when they would have been in areas like Siberia, right, or Asia, it wouldn't even have been what we call it now. The cultures that you associate with those lands now weren't even there. They weren't in existence. The amalgamation of people hadn't happened. Like so many things that we're associating with now wouldn't even have taken place yet. You know what I'm saying? That's why when like people have such an issue with migrations, right? And wanting to be from one place, you can't be from one place because how like migrations are natural parts of this phenomenon called life. The same way we say, I got 4 grandparents, then I got 8 grandparents, then I got 16, then I got 32. You see how quick that shit is happening, right? Well, if you have a group of people that live in an area and they continue to live, if you only move 2 miles per generation, you'll cover the entire earth in a matter of like 40, 50, something like that, 1,000 years. If you only move 2 miles per generation. And as you have more children, what happens? Your family grows. You have to expand. right? It's you and your wife. You got a 2-bedroom. The kid got a room, right? You have more kids. You got to get a bigger house, right? As those kids grow, they move out, so on and so forth. It's constant expansion. And when you're talking about communities and bodies of people, like migrations are an absolute necessity in the existence of mankind. So you're talking about a group of people who would have started a migration from what we now know as Africa and would have walked the entire span of the entire planet. And the last place you could go to and not walk no further at these times was what you would call now New Jersey, right? And that's who the Lenape were. Stop dancing about what answer. Does the tribe in the region now known as Siberia? No, because they're not the Lenape. They're groups that came there after. Do you not understand that? There are people who live in the town you grew up in that were not there when you were living there. Do they call themselves you? No, they just live in that town. They live the same culture you probably lived when you were there, having the same experiences, going to the same stores, but they're not you. Like, you have to really use some real intellectual thought. I am not the same people now that I was 40,000 years ago. And to associate me with people who now occupy the place where my people were 40,000 years ago is not intelligent. It does not make sense, especially when there's constant migrations, right? There's constant infusion of new people, right? And when you spend enough time in a place, you're going to start to change according to the environments. So now you're talking about a people who have migrated all over the place and have spent time in different places for thousands of years, which develop different traits based on the environment and the foods they're eating, like the nuances, trying to simplify it by saying, oh, so you the same people that's in Siberia now? That's trying to simplify something that took place 40,000 years. And that's not going to help people understand anything. You understand? You're trying to get to the mountain communities, they up there. Like, they up there. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, who's playing? Who not ready? I don't know. Let me get out of the thing because I don't want to take things the wrong way and then start getting into some, you know what I mean? I'm not doing that. But so yeah, um, there's a lot going on out here. I'm not playing semantics. When people say, no, we're American Indian, not Native, that's semantics. I don't play semantics. The very people who play semantics are the ones who accuse others of doing it. There's no difference between any of these things. You know what? Like, that's fine. So, yeah, there's a lot of disinformation out here. You know what I mean? None of it's coming from the indigenous communities. It's all coming from people who read books and have no experience in actual indigenous communities. That's the issue. People have taken philosophies from different movements that have empowered the people, and remnants of those philosophies hang around. And then they snatch them up. It's a part of their bag, and they pull it out when they need to pull it out. People pull out science when they need to pull it out, and they put it away when they don't want it to have any say so in the equation that's being presented to them. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to share a little tonight, talking about the history of the Aboriginal community, not any one Aboriginal community in particular, but the philosophies and psychologies and where they draw their points from. Native American and American Indian have two different historical definitions, so it's not semantics. Yes, it is, because you're talking about words. You're talking about words. You need to use the term Native American and American Indian because you don't know the specifics of what you're talking about. right? That all those terms are called xenonyms. Do you know what a xenonym is? Look it up. The real people don't have to use those terms. The real people say Shinnecock, I'm Navasink. The real people say I'm Raritan, he's Narragansett. We don't need those blanket terms. So when you start talking about Native American and American Indian, what you're talking about is either United States politics or you're talking from a foreign perspective. No, you're not talking about two different groups of people. You're talking about a foreign perspective, an external perspective. You're trying to say these are two different people. No, they're not. Native American and American, Native and Indigenous are all synonyms. They all mean the same thing. Now, if you're talking about politics, right? If you're talking about politics, that's a different thing. That's not our conversation. That is United States political conversation. And if you want to have that argument with them, then you have to play by the rules that they designate, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real people talking to real people. We don't say, hey, my Native American. We say, oh, you Powhatan? I'm Lenape. All that other stuff is wordplay. It's games. Yeah, we asked the Anael-Bey for permission to cross the Mississippi. Absolutely. And then we got into it with them when we was crossing because there was so many of us. They thought we was maybe gonna try and pull some funny shit. Yes, Native American and American Indian are thousands of different groups of people. It's not specific. Only general studies. You want to talk a general conversation? You go have a general conversation. We having specific conversations over here so we could be right and exact. That's the problem. Too many people are having general conversations. I'm Aboriginal. Everybody in the world is Aboriginal, is Indigenous somewhere. What does that mean? What laws does it tie you into? American Indian, there are no American Indian treaties. There are only treaties between specific nations who have been classified as American Indian. But on those treaties, it says there's specific titles of what they call themselves. So all this wordplay of Native American, Native American is native is born in. So anybody born in America is a native. So guess what? Those people that you call indigenous who are actually born here, they're Native American too. Right? They're born here, so they're Native American. Like it's all wordplay. But guess what? When you know the identities of the true people and you can address them as such, you don't have to play those wordplay. I don't have to say, oh yeah, he's my Native American brother. I can say, nah, he's my Ramapo cousin. You understand? That's my Nanticoke cousin. I'm Sandhill. They know who I am. We all Lenape. Or what Lenape group am I part of? I'm from the Muncie group. You understand? We don't need to talk about being American Indian and all that. We talk about exactly who we are. People are trying to dumb it down and make it this general conversation when the law is not going to protect anybody general. That's right. You never say I'm native. You say you Nanticoke because that speaks exactly to who you are. And that's where your pride and where your families lie and your history and your story. So when you speak to other people and you tell them who they are, they know exactly who you are. And they know exactly what conversation to have with you if they are from these communities. But as soon as somebody says I'm American Indian too, that just tells somebody that, okay, you got some ancestry, but you obviously don't know who you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you got to understand what you're talking about. If somebody came up to you and said, yeah, I played for the NFL, and you said, what team? And they was like, the NFL, you'd look at them like they was crazy. How are you saying you played for the NFL, but you don't know what team you played on? You understand? This ain't about trying to put people down. It's trying to raise people up and not be satisfied with, you know what I mean? And guess what? It's going to be hard. You're going to have to keep, it's going to get harder. What people thought being identifying with your native ancestry is going to make things easier. It's going to make things harder. Why don't second generation Europeans call themselves Native American? You know why? Because they was never stripped of their identity. They were stripped of their identity. That's why they don't call themselves these other terms. You understand? That's a dopey analogy. What? Because that's what you're telling me when you talk about I'm a Native American. You're telling me, okay, I played in the NFL, but I can't tell you what team I played on. So why are we having this conversation? Like people, uh, Oh, that's a dope. My bad. My eyes is water. I thought it said it's a dopey analogy. Um, people like people are sensitive right now, right? And they feel like because somebody knows something more than them, that they talking down to them. But it's okay. American football. See, there you go. That's the word game. It's American football. It's national. It's national. You want to get into that? We can get into that. The national. American is a nationality. So the National Football League, national accounts for nationalities. American is the one. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, am I being sensitive? Yeah, I'm being sensitive because I hear people misrepresenting communities that fought hard to remain. And now those communities are being called all types of names because of they don't fit the bill that the Aboriginal community wants them to fit. They don't look like the paintings that they hold up to prove who they are when those paintings are 400 years ago. And if those people in them paintings are real people, guess what? By now they could look anyway. But we're trying to hang our hat on paintings. This is what the real Indian looked like. So those people got to be fake. And you're not taking account 400 years of colonization. No, I'm not talking about myself. Right? Right? So I'm talking about myself because someone disagreed. Listen, this is the point I'm trying to make. And it was just demonstrated, right? You could disagree with me all you want. That's fine. That's your right. But people that know the truth will agree. And that's where I'm going. See, I'm not staying stagnant trying to lift. I did that for like 10, 15 years, trying to lift up people that didn't agree, trying to show them. Like I've been past that, right? Right now, my mind is gravitating towards the people who say, yeah, yup. And guess what? She don't agree with me. She agreed with the truth. She came and said that she don't call herself Native American. She said, I'm Nancy Coke. She not agreeing with me. She agreeing with the truth. See what I'm saying? That's the truth. That's the road we on. We not on his road, her road, my road. We on that red road. That's the truth. That's your way back. Yes, colonization can change your bloodline. Are you kidding me? It can infuse your bloodline with all different types of bloodlines, which now connect you to all different types of history. Like it does change your bloodline. It changes how you look. It changes how you talk. It changes your culture. It's done all that to us. Absolutely. That's the first thing they do is intermix with you to change your bloodline. Because now they have claim, their children have claim over the lands that were once solely, not even yours, the lands that you once belonged to, now their children belong to. You get the difference? It's not even about owning the land. The lands that you once belonged to, as soon as they marry into your family, now their children belong to that land too. Now their children have as much right to that land too. Bloodline changes everything. That's it. Like, yeah, my family lost lands because of people we intermarried with. And it wasn't even that it was like, I'm going to marry these people so we can steal their land. No, it ain't that. You got to understand that oh, this shit is so, it's way deeper than, this shit is not as simple as people want to make it. Anybody that gives you a simple answer, he's a traitor, they're sellouts, he's a $5 Indian. Those are the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. You don't want that. Animals have probably peed on that. It's so low hanging, you don't want to digest that. You want to get up in that tree and find that fruit that's able to develop free of anything that can molest it or harm it, right? And all that stuff they tell you, $5 Indian. No, no. The truth of the matter is, them people probably do have absolute native ancestry. They know who it is because they have their genealogy. Just so happen that they've been intermixing with different ethnicities. So at this point in time, this person looked white. But guess what? 3, 4, 5 generations ago, he descended directly from a chief. Like, it's as simple as that. That was as dark as anybody. That's how life really works. You can deny it all you want, but that's the truth, right? So before you label people, if you really want to walk in the light of the truth, you're going to find out things about them, right? You're not just going to make assumptions based on look like. That's not intelligent. You know what I mean? So when the government get done with us, we have to go back to the old way of living. Yeah, like, that's it. But this the thing. It's going to be the old way merged with the new way. Because technology is here to stay. If the government falls, then it's not like they're going to be like, oh, we taking all this electronic with us, we're taking all these cars with us. The government is just people and a philosophy. Once you remove the people and the philosophy, all this other stuff is still going to be here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you say can't nobody prove it, but actual science has proven it. It states it because the nuances are much more intricate than what you're giving. Like, this shit is way more intricate than what you can't simplify it by saying can't nobody prove all people started from one group. Like, that's simplifying it. It's not one group. It's even bigger. It's deeper than that. You're talking about, bro, you're talking about going back to uh one-celled creatures doubling, and then, like, you got to get into actual science and genetics to truly understand what's being said. Like, it's not being conveyed. You got to understand the science to truly be able to pass an opinion on it. Like, honestly, it's way deeper than what you know. It's like an argument that somebody could have with their girl, and when they get out there, or you're watching it, you're seeing the results of it, but you don't know the intricate details of what happened as to why they got into this argument and what happened here and how she feels this way because she was marginalized here and all these other little different things that now culminate in this. It's so much more to understand before you can pass a judgment on it. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of the same things that you lean on, right, come from the same type of science. No, you shouldn't accept nothing. You should accept what your genealogy say. You should accept the truth. Like, I don't pick and choose between the truth. Like, my family did great things, and my family did some horrific things. It don't change who we are. I can't pick and choose between the two. It's my history. I just choose to learn from it. The people infiltrated the tribes. Yeah, but okay, the people did infiltrate. I'm not denying that. Absolutely. But, like, not all but most, and that's the issue with learning under certain tribes. Absolutely. But I'm talking about learning from your tribe. You know what I'm saying? And if your tribe is disbanded and don't exist, then you're gonna have to learn from a tribe that's close, that's gonna give it to you. That's gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm definitely not saying that you have to learn from disagreeable tribes. Absolutely not. But there's gonna be there's going to be tribes that disagree with you that are going to look like you, and there's going to be tribes that disagree with you that don't look like you. There's going to be tribes that agree with you that don't look like you. There's going to be tribes that agree with you that do. Like, you're going to have to find a balance in different places. Absolutely. Like, when we talk about the first treaty, when you talk about infiltration, we talk about the first treaty, right? The Treaty of Pitt. That's the first treaty between my tribe doesn't claim Africa as their home. Nobody's claiming Africa as their home, bro. A tribe is a nation. Africa is the origins of a species. Nobody's national memories go back to the origins of their species. Once again, there's a difference between species and nations. Nobody's nation is tracing themselves back to their origin as a species. They trace themselves back to the origins of a nation. Science can only do that. So, of course, your tribe never claimed to be from Africa. Like, of course not. But when we talk about the species Homo sapiens sapien, right, there's no way around where its origins come from. By the time your tribe would have came into existence, from the time that the Homo sapiens sapien was developed, was millions of years. Now who's the one playing semantics? If you claim to originate, I don't claim to originate from Africa. Africa is a name that was given to a certain portion of that land. I don't claim to be from Africa. We just recognize that body of land as being called Africa, right? I'm saying Homo sapien, and it's not even me saying it. Science says Homo sapiens sapien comes out of the land that we now call Africa. Does that make everybody on the planet African? No, it makes everybody on the planet a Homo sapiens sapien. What makes you an African or an American or any of the things that differentiate you from other nations is your locale. Yes, the Chinese do claim it. The Negritos are the oldest people in that land. All like everyone claims it. I don't know where people are getting that they don't. Everyone claims it, and not only do they claim it, but when you start to study their traditions, you'll see they have certain mythologies and certain events that they honor that speak to that. This is how I know people aren't really studied. They just reading like Google shit. Like, oh my goodness. Like, what does China's flag represent? It represents the sun. This, like, all these things have to do with migrations. Like, y'all not really getting it because you not like you gotta like let me not say that because I don't want to even sound like I'm trying to talk down to nobody. Listen, when you start to get into your tribal information and start to understand certain things, you're going to understand how descriptive, right? And if you ever start to study a language, you're going to go build, all right, peace, bro. Peace, family. When you start to understand your language and how descriptive it is, you're going to get it. You're really going to get it. But you're trying to process things through languages that really can't embody these things. But trust me, you won't get it when, like, there's a tradition called Morning Star. The Morning Star tradition is something that exists within every Native American community, right? Morning Star, right? What it represents rebirth, renewal, all these different things, right? New day, right? But that morning star is represented by Venus, right? And Venus is, I'm not trying to gaslight myself out of a contradiction. What contradiction? No, your mind can't elevate to understand what a species is and what a nation is. So you're stuck on that, and you're stuck on being upset about being connected to Africa because you associate Africa with slave ships. The problem is your mind starts to think where the white man tells you to start to think. That's why your direct connection with Africa has to do with the slave trade, which means you don't want nothing to do with it. I'm talking about the origins of a species, which is Homo sapiens sapien, which is modern man, the wise man. The difference between Homo sapiens sapien and all the species of man that came before him, Homo sapiens sapien has a developed frontal lobe. The difference between adults and children, children's frontal lobes aren't fully developed, right? So the issue is, if you're not a Homo sapiens sapien, right? If you didn't come from the Homo sapiens sapien, what are you? And is your frontal lobe fully developed? So rather than do your genealogy, you probably should get a CAT scan. Because if your frontal lobe isn't fully developed, just like children, you won't be able to comprehend much of the information that's being presented to you, right? So that leaves somebody like me having to repeat myself over and over and over and over. The origins of a species is not the same as the origins of a nation or man. The origins of a species, I got to keep saying these things over and over, which now starts to make it stagnant. And now I start to get a certain way, and then I could just block you, because now you're just throwing words out. Like, what am I gaslighting? Because you can't understand that species and man are different things. So, like, if the Homo sapiens sapien is older than the event that took place in North Africa that named that place Africa, if the Afri people, right, if the Afri people whom Africa is named after are Homo sapiens sapiens, what does that mean? It means Homo sapiens sapiens predate the Afri people, who predate Europeans calling a certain part of Africa, Africa. So that means I'm just using these terms as references to geographic locations, okay? And on top of that, whether that, like, none of that has anything to do with the fact that 400 years ago, where were you? What nation were you a part of when colonization occurred? And how are you going to use that information to put you and your families in a better position, right? Not about where we originally came from and why people have a problem with me not having a problem accepting that humanity comes from Africa. See, there you go. Like Albert Perry's family, when they completed their genealogy, right, they got stuck and they couldn't go no further. So the only reason we know about Albert Perry is because his family got DNA tests. So we only know about him because of what the DNA says. And the DNA says he has the oldest markers. But the DNA also says that he traces back to Cameroon, West Africa. So we can't throw one genetic finding out to stand on another when they both come from the same sample. So we could brag about the oldest DNA being found in America, but his people come from Africa. So what's that do? And then people could argue with me and say, no, go argue with his family. Because aren't we in a position where we have the right, like, to tell our own stories? So if this man's family is telling their story, who are we to argue with? You understand? And now we can get into the whole, once they get a hold of your information, they can do whatever you want with it. I'm not dealing with all the conspiracy theories. I want to keep it as close to what it is. If this man's family said they traced their roots back to Cameroon, West Africa, then that's what they said for themselves. Who are we? Yeah, exactly. His story ain't anybody's story. But the point I'm trying to make is people use his story to justify their own claims, when really they could use their own claims to justify their own claims. We don't need to remove slave ships and the origins of a species from the table to prove that we're Indigenous Americans. If you're Indigenous Americans, you'll be able to prove it. You don't need to rewrite history and have revisionist history to prove it. You understand? You don't need to demonize a whole nother group of people to prove it. You don't have to minimalize a whole nother group of people to prove it. You know what I'm saying? Like DNA test is for entertainment purposes, and that's what I thought for a long time. But let me tell you, DNA is how they, like, people who don't get it want to use DNA to prove there's something or for something or there's somebody. But all DNA proves is whether or not you have markers from different places on the planet. Like, DNA can't actually prove that you come from a specific tribe or that you're a specific ethnicity. It just proves where your ancestors were at different points in history based on genetic markers that they've acquired. That's all it proves, right? There are no historical records that prove the history and people here in the Americas that predates Cameroon and Africa. Wait, I don't even understand what that said. Listen, if you'd like to have a serious conversation about the origins of man, right? You need to produce one piece of evidence and solid evidence, not something that you confuse as evidence. Solid evidence that states that man originated in the Americas, like where in the Americas and under what conditions. Listen, see, now you're playing word games. When was Cameroon founded? We're not talking about the founding of a city or state. We're talking about the existence of genetics amongst the people who occupied that land long before it was founded, but long before it was called Cameroon. Because Cameroon, founded just means named. It doesn't mean actually found. It means named. So you're asking me, when was Cameroon named Cameroon? As if that has some bearing on the DNA that was found in the people that occupied that land. No, you're talking about names. I'm talking about actual phenomena. That is the misleading, like, semantics you're playing. You're talking about words. I'm talking about a phenomena, people, genetics found in a group of people who had been in that area longer than it was named Cameroon. We're just using that as geographical references, just like you're playing the Africa game. I'm using the term Africa as a geographical reference, not to say that when my people came from that land, they were called Africans or they practiced any of the culture and anything that exists in Africa as we know it today. How could it, when my people would have left that land up to like 70,000 years ago? That predates anything that's going on now. So why would it be something that's reflective, or, you understand? How can you then prove the species in that area? It's not up to me to prove it. This is what the scientists are saying. The same scientists that have given us everything that we base reality on now. So it ain't up for me to prove it because I'm not that scientist. All I know is I wouldn't know, like we wouldn't know about Neanderthals if scientists didn't tell us. Because guess what? None of us here has ever seen a Neanderthal. Nobody. You wouldn't know they existed if scientists didn't tell you. Okay? But we have no problem accepting the existence of Neanderthals. We even call white people Neanderthals, which is wrong because they're Homo sapiens sapiens, right? But we'll call them Neanderthals. You understand? You see how the minds shit ain't really matching up. You see how we mix emotion with science, right? It's been a long thought theory that white people are descendants of Neanderthals, and they're not. Neanderthals are a whole different species of human, right? So just like there's different species, there's Neanderthal, there's all different species, right? And a lot of what science is finding out now is that modern man is a mixture of multiple species. No, Caucasians don't claim to come from monkeys. You are misreading information. What it states is that we all, Caucasians are Homo sapiens sapiens. They're not a different species of people. All right. What you're talking about is racism. Okay. Like, Caucasians are Homo sapiens sapiens. Black people, Indians, Negroes, whatever you want to call us, are Homo sapiens sapiens. Same species. They look different because of certain genetic reasons and where they eventually evolved and who they intermixed with in terms of other human species. And we look different for the same reason. All right, that's it. So when they're talking about humanity evolved, the evolution of man, they're not talking about the evolution of black man. They're not talking about the evolution of white man. They're talking about the evolution of man. Simple as that. Like, people be like, oh, this shit is racist. How is it racist when they're talking about humanity? They're not talking about white man versus black man. They're talking about humanity. The shit that they interject is their own personal beliefs. Like, oh, well, we believe the black man's brain doesn't this and that. That's just what they say, what they believe. But the fact and the science of it says everything else. In fact, the science of it says we are better adapted and stronger physically for the environments we live in. That's what the science actually says, right? Like all this, we come from monkeys. It just means that us and monkeys at one point had a common ancestor. But guess what? We're mammals. So that means us and whales once had a common ancestor. Does that mean we come from whales? No. The Charles Darwin theory wasn't racist. The people who presented it to you put their racist twist on it. The theory of evolution deals with the evolution of mankind, not the evolution of the black man, not the evolution of the white man. It deals with the theory of the evolution of mankind. They then put a spin on it to separate different species of men, of human, as in race. Racism is what's wrong. It's the racism that's injected into the theory. But the theory of evolution of human beings coming out of previous, like, it's all the same. It's all the same. Like, Neanderthals are Homo sapiens sapiens cousins. So you don't come from your cousin, but you have a common ancestor. That's all this shit is saying. We don't come from no goddamn monkeys. But us and monkeys have a common ancestor. Somewhere down the line, up the line, we come from the same species. That don't make us the same. Just like you ain't the same person as your cousin. Who's these scientists that created Homo sapiens science? Like, bro, the same scientists that have established everything that you actually believe now. Everything's a theory, bro. Nothing can be proven until it's absolutely proven. And the only way to prove evolution is to go back and witness it. And we're not going to ever be able to witness evolution. So it has to stand as a theory. Certain things can only be theories because you're not going to be able to recreate it or witness it again to make it a fact. So it simply stands as a theory, but it's a scientific theory. And all the other theories that people come up with are conspiracy theories. And they're predicated on people lying to you and not wanting you to know the truth and this and that. Those are the factors that people think make it a credible theory. There's absolutely no science behind it. Just they're lying to you. They don't want to show you the truth, this, that. And that's called a conspiracy theory. Very different than a theory based on actual facts, measurements, phenomena that can be observed. You understand? This is the theory. A boat could sail across the ocean. That's the theory, right? Now, if you don't have anything to build the boat, it remains a theory. But the moment you build the boat and sail it across the ocean, that theory is now fact. Okay, what made this person think a boat could float. Well, when I put wood in the water, the wood doesn't sink. Okay, boom, that's a fact. That strengthens your theory. Okay, if I build a wide enough thing, wide enough base, it's going to allow people to stand on it. And if we build some type of walls, it could keep water from rushing in. And then we could add this to it. All these things make the theory even more plausible. You understand? Then you get this whole list of things that make the theory plausible, which are like equations. And then you add it all up, and then you have something that can actually allow you to test the theory. And you test the theory, and it becomes true. And now it's a fact, and it's accepted. That's it. That's how these things happen. So certain things can't be proven. Like, understand? Yeah, once it's proven, it's not called a theory. Guess what? Everything that people believe in is a theory for the most part. People saying we're right from here is a theory. Like, I'm not a theory. I'm based on actual phenomena and fact. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not a theory. I have parents who had parents. I come from communities that still stand, people who still have a language. That's not a theory. Everything people believe is a theory. No, I just said once it's proven, it's not fact. But all the things that people are talking about in terms of we don't come from Africa, uh, this man is that, all these theories that are being thrown around in these communities now, they're just that, theories. People will tell me, this is what people will say. I don't care if Charles Darwin was related to Walter Plecker. Like, I don't care. I don't need either one of them to validate the truth. Nor am I offended by the theory of evolution. I know ain't nobody better than me, right? Like, I don't like, see what I'm saying? Like, racism, none of these things are anything I'm hung up on. Like, I'm not concerned that somebody said humanity has a common ancestor with an ape. That don't bother me. I don't care. That don't make me feel less of who I am. Like, okay, fine. That's no big deal. What makes me feel good about who I am is my family's contributions to our communities, where we come from, and what we've done. I could care less if they say we come from monkeys. I don't fucking care. Yeah, science, Bible theory, all that is, yes, all dogma. Depends on how you look at it. Like, all that don't mean nothing. Like, the important things is people being able to communicate, right? Being able to suggest things and know when, oh, you're talking about a theory as opposed to something that's facts, right? People will tell me the out of Africa is a theory, and then they'll use Pangea to prove it. Guess what? Pangea is a theory too. So the moment they do that, I understand that they're not really playing on solid ground, because you just missed that. You just try to debunk a theory with a theory. And to me, that's not, that just lets me know that I'm dealing with somebody who's not thinking things through all the way. You understand? Because you don't believe in one theory, but you're going to prove it using another theory. Because none of these things are phenomena we've experienced. So I got to get ready to go, man. I didn't say you pushed Pangea. I'm saying people have suggested things like that. I don't know who you are, your boy. Like, I haven't even looked into what it is you stand for, who you are, what your nation is, what history you have. I don't know these things. You know what I'm saying? And I don't pass. I try not to have any type of impression over somebody until I learn certain things. Because somebody could tell me a whole bunch of information about all types of things, and I ask them something simple, and they got a real complicated answer, which lets me know it really ain't what they setting it up to be. You know what I'm saying? So once again, I want to thank my guest, Sharif Anael-Bey, for participating tonight. Appreciate you, brother. Thank everybody for tuning in. We'll be back soon. See who I can line up next. And we're going to get to it, man. We're going to get to it. But basically, tonight was just to show that a lot of the philosophies that are a part of, yeah, there's proof a flood happened on the planet. Absolutely. No, they don't. American Indians don't almost say that. They don't. Nobody says that. Like they talking about their nations. Like, and nobody tells these stories with the GPS and the latitude and longitude. Like that's not how these stories are told. Like none of these nations are saying that. It's people who aren't a part of these nations that are saying these nations are saying that. Because nations don't talk like that. That's not a part of, they say we've always been here because they're referencing to when these people came here. Can't nobody remember back to the origins of a species. So why would they say anything else? Like it's like I don't get how y'all expect to hear that. How do you expect, like, who talks like that? Nobody says, okay, so your boy Ariel, you're saying Turtle Gang is living in a Native American bubble of misinformation. And what do you have to back that up? Like, that's literally just words coming out your mouth. Like, I am Lenny Lenape, and the information I present is Lenny Lenape. It's not Native American. You understand? Like, you're in error. Like, you have the opportunity to speak exactly about an exact people, but you choose to use the term Native American because you can refute that because it's so general. No, the Lakota don't say they come from Asia, but guess what? They all migrated. Everybody did. Everybody did. Y'all are expecting individual tribes to sit up here and say, yeah, we come from Africa. No, they're not going to say that because they're talking about their national origins. Like, that's what y'all don't get. Like, my Moorish native, no, it was a man who studied Moorish science. That's it. Like, y'all not getting it. And then, like, I've actually spent enough time with this person. Like, I allowed him on this whole thing, and he was just being contentious the whole way. Listen, I understand people have a problem with that, right? All these people that are saying these things, talk to these nations about their migration stories and their creation stories. See, what's going on is people are asking general people, when you're talking about native communities, go talk to the historians. Don't just talk to the person who's like, oh, yeah, you're this. Let me ask you something. They might not be qualified to answer the question. How many of us are Americans but can't tell you who the 12th president was? Like these are disingenuous tactics. If you want to have a conversation about an indigenous nation, if you want to talk to somebody from an indigenous nation and you want to talk to him about their history and culture, you have to talk to someone from that nation who's knowledgeable. You don't just talk to someone because they're from that nation. That don't mean they're knowledgeable of the cultural practices. There are so many tribal members that don't even speak their own language, and that's happening all over the place. Right? So what you need to do is, like, I don't know. I would think that people's minds are much more advanced than see, this is the thing, okay, Kiowa, I want to show you something. You're saying the colonizer is telling us we migrated here. That's what you're doing. But what you don't understand is that these individual tribes, like my tribe, has our own migration story. And guess what? We told our migration story to the Europeans in the early 1800s, and it was published in 1832. The Europeans came out with the out of Africa theory in the 1940s. So, what I'm saying to you is, how are we getting our information from the European, from the colonizer, when we told them? I am speaking for my tribe. I just said the Lenape, but guess what? All the tribes call us grandfather, right? All the Algonquin speaking tribes call us grandfather because they say we're the oldest. How do we know we're the oldest? Because we have the oldest dialect of Algonquin spoken amongst these tribes here in New Jersey. And all this has been linguistically proven. Why? Because we tell them and then they figure it out. No, it wasn't out long before that. It wasn't. And if it was, it wasn't universally accepted because guess what? The publications weren't sent all around. Long before that concept of out of Africa was released to the people, my nation existed and we knew our migration stories, just like every other nation that was here knew their migration stories. So you can sit up here and insist and say all the things you want, but you're not producing no evidence that states otherwise. When was Charles Darwin born? Yeah, some say they came from the sun. And do you take that literal? Do you think they really came from the sun? Do you think there's some type of allegory in that? So when people talk about they came right from here, they're talking about the earth. They're not talking about, let me see, I'm going to tell y'all, I'm going to share one more thing with you. All right. 1109 AD, there was a group of, they were a part of the Chichimek Empire, right? They occupied areas in North America, right? Right above, like right above Mexico, right above what we call Mexico, right? At the time in Mexico, there were people living there. Those people would have been the Mayans and the Toltecs, all right? So in 1109, this group of people came down into Anahuac Valley, right? They came down into Anahuac Valley and they expected to encounter people who had been fighting them off for a long time. They didn't encounter nobody. So they kept moving deeper and deeper into Anahuac Valley until they settled in what is now Mexico. The people I'm talking about were the Aztecs. The Aztecs come from North America. They come from the west part of Northern America, northern United States, right? So the Aztec invaded 1109 AD. And when they settled in a city that they found. This city was called Teotihuacan. It was already established. They got there, they called it the City of the Gods. Teotihuacan is an Aztec name. The actual people that built that place were not from there, right? So when they got there, they came there with a migration story and they came there with a creation story. And you know what they did? They superimposed their creation story on that location. And they decided right then and there that Teotihuacan was their place of their origin. And from that point on, they told people this is where we're from. So when we talk about people telling you where we from and all that, they're talking about certain perspectives. They're talking about like you got to be able to take it into context to literally think these people are saying we come from the mud. Like, come on, man, we are. You're not children. These stories are told allegorically, right? But you got to do some real looking into it. When these people say we come right from here, of course they saying that because they was here longer than they can remember anything. But when we start talking about migration patterns, which is connected to DNA, like they can trace migration patterns based on DNA. The same way you can trace your damn phone or your earbuds when you lose them. They can trace them because of something that's in that earpad, in that earbud, and then you can look at on your phone, right? They can trace it. Well, they can do the same thing with DNA. They can trace the places that all the people that made you up, right? Not just you. This DNA is coming from all the people in existence before you that made you. So if you have 4 grandparents, then you go 8 grandparents, then 16, then 32, then 64, on, and you go back hundreds of thousands of years, you're going to have ancestry from all over the place. Yes, DNA can trace origins. That's what it does. It literally traces origins. That's literally what it does. Literally. It can't trace ethnicity, but it can trace origin. That's literally what it does. That's literally one of the ways they use it. People have a problem with DNA because they don't understand what it's telling them. It's not telling you that you're not a Native American. The Native American DNA they would compare you to would be specific tribes that you are not. So that's the case. Specific tribes you are not. So listen, when I am definitely going to have somebody who is an expert in DNA and not just a social media expert. I've been studying this shit. No, I'm going to have somebody that is trained in the discipline, and we'll allow them to share with us what's really going on. All right, because too many people, like I said, are half scientists. They study things a little bit, and they only study it from the perspective that's going to empower their position. So that will be something we'll talk to people about. But once again, that's not something that I lean on. I think people should lean on their genealogy to get them back to a point where they can identify what tribal nations they were part of, what communities they come from, so they can start building that up, right? And in the meantime, like, it's about being a good person, trying to elevate your character. So let me get off here. I gotta go. It's been a nice few hours. Um, say peace to everybody. And till next time, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody. Peace and blessings.